Everything in this park is dangerous.
Listen, ice skating is dangerous, but you don't need to ice skate while carrying scissors. Okay, you have to put some certain controls in place.
If I pay $40,000, I ice skate with whatever the hell I want.
Welcome back to Shat on TV Westworld Edition, the podcast that's the companion piece for the hit HBO television series Westworld. My name is Roger Roper, alongside my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Gene Lyons.
Go Tribe.
This is the podcast episode where we respond to all of our listener email, theories, and analysis in a little segment we call the Westworld Telegraph. Gentlemen, it's been a packed week. It's been an exciting week for us personally. We've had one-on-one conversations with actors from the show. We've grown our Twitter following to over 200. And Big D, you were sharing some stats with us. Our week-over-week growth is astronomical.
Yeah, we had modest expectations when we started, so it's nice to see that week over week we've been growing substantially. So it lets us know that people are enjoying it as much as we enjoy doing it. So hopefully we can continue growing through the season.
Yeah, and one of the things that we absolutely love getting are the iTunes reviews. It's one of the things that helps the podcast grow. I think we're number 3 in terms of feedback and reviews on iTunes. The majority of them are very positive. So again, before we start, we want to thank all of our fans and people who've listened to the show and subscribed. This, of all the 3 episodes and content we put out this week, this is seems to be our fan favorite.
Yeah, I think maybe it's people like to hear their own voice, or it's finally we're giving a voice to the fans that are sitting around like we are. We started this as 3 regular guys, little humble podcast so that we could, get a little more out of the show and spend some time together and shoot the shit. And it seems like everyone else wants to join in, and we're all like in one big group now, just losing our minds.
So if this is your first time ever listening to the Westworld Telegraph, this is how we do it. We take all the best parts of the emails that we receive, and gosh, there's so many that we can't read the entire email, but you can go to our website at shatontv.com and see the long-form versions of all the analysis, feedback, and theories that we receive from our listeners. There's a comment section that you can actually add to the conversation. So again, we implore you, check that out, shatontv.com, navigate to the Westworld Telegraph.
Yeah, and if I can chime in with that, I was running some of the web stats today. So we thought it was a good idea because we don't want to shortchange the people who take the time to write in these detailed, analysis and theories. And they're great, but it's impossible for us to get to them all. So we posted them on the web. I went today, and there's been almost like 2,000 page views on all of the different theories. So if you send one in, don't think it ends here. You can go to the website, and there's a good chance that people are commenting back and forth on your theory. So that way it's good for the listeners to actually plant their flag in the ground if they have an idea and get some credit for it and keep the conversation going.
It's like Reddit, only easier. If you're afraid of using Reddit, Big D, I know that you don't know how to use Reddit. And I know, Gene, you hate Facebook groups. So this is like for those people who hate Facebook, who are afraid of Twitter and don't like Reddit or don't know what Reddit is, go to shatontv.com and you can see all the fan theories and comment both back there. So
and unlike Reddit with their less than friendly editors,
yes,
no,
yeah.
we are nice. Yeah. We're not going to chop off all your comments or threaten to ban you.
Yeah, Reddit's listen. I enjoy Reddit. I get there, but I will admit that the people who run Reddit, or especially the moderators, and some subs can be a little overbearing, a little too into themselves. But with that being said, Big D, let's fire up the old Westworld Telegraph and get this thing started. We got a lot to cover. Our first Westworld Telegraph comes all the way from Australia. It's Georgia again. She writes, "Hey guys, no crazy theories today. I just wanted to let you know that I seriously appreciate the honesty this week. There are a lot of podcasts out there that seem to throw honesty out the window and just rave about how perfect the show is every second of every episode. That's why I choose not to listen to them. The great thing about being a fan of a TV show is getting to discuss it with other fans, even if you don't have the same opinions every time. The no bullshit approach you guys are taking with the podcast is refreshing, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Thanks for always keeping it real, Georgia. Guys, this is why I love Georgia.
Oh, that's why you love Georgia? Right. Georgia, I got to say I love you too. Thanks for that, the encouraging words. I know as being, this is Gene, by the way, I know as being as critical as I am about a lot of things getting really fired up, often Raj and I disagree, and it's nice to have a little backup because, and to the credit to my co-hosts, I appreciate, not being pressured to love everything, and likewise I don't pressure them to either. The three of us, as we've said before, couldn't be more different in our approaches toward television. We agree sometimes, we disagree sometimes, and it's again the way I approach any piece of art is with a critical eye, and I can point out what I love and what I don't love, and imperfections and perfections, and I've yet to see anything that was 100% perfect. If we found that piece of art, then we could just stop making art.
Yeah, after the instant take, I had some conversations with my wife and with the guys, and I said the biggest mistake we could ever do is to not be genuine. Like I said on the cast, I said, if we come up with something and we say this is what we think, it doesn't make it right. But if we start just bullshitting and not being who we are, that would be the worst thing we could do. So right or wrong, we'll always try to be genuine, and hopefully more often than not, we're right.
Thanks, Georgia, for the message. Our next one comes from Luke. It's entitled Harden the Fuck Up. I enjoy your podcast, especially the Instacast, but chill out about what your listeners think. You spend almost 10 minutes trying to placate people in the latest episode. 10 minutes! One would have been more than enough. Keep up the good work, Luke. So he wants us to harden the fuck up. So similar email as Georgia, but Luke says we need to grow some balls.
Luke, what you got to understand is that Roger is a real people person. If this was just my podcast, I would be like, everybody fuck off. I don't care what you think. And you know what? We'd have 0 listeners. I think the point is basically that it's hard to have a conversation through a podcast because it's typically one way. We only get one opportunity a week to have a kind of a two-way conversation with the email that's coming in. And so it's just important for us. We want people to know that, there were some misconceptions there that people thought that in disagreeing, we were putting them down or that we were somehow like disgusted with our own fan base or the show's fan base. They're not even our fans. Let's be honest. You're the show's fans. And we just want to make sure that we're clear on that. I think once we've established that groundwork, maybe 2 or 3 telegraphs from now, hopefully before the end of the season, we can just go ahead and operate under the assumption that people understand that we love you, and we're just trying to give our honest takes.
The funniest, comments that we got were saying that we were condescending and we think we're so much brighter. I think it's the opposite. I think we're a bit of an idiot sometimes. They were way off. The best insult though was a 1-star review on iTunes where somebody wrote, "Oh, you guys are clowns. You don't know what a big dong looks like." 1 star. Is that a good thing or a bad thing that we don't know what a big dong looks like? Or did this reviewer have better experiences than we did?
I think there's some truth to that. I wish I knew what a big dong looked like. I wish I had something to compare it to.
I don't know. I spend about five hours a week with a big D, and I don't know. I'm pretty familiar with what it looks like.
Thanks, Luke, for writing in. Okay, those emails out of the way. Now it's all fan theories and speculation from here on out. Our first speculation telegraph comes from Christopher. He writes, "Hi there, enjoy the podcast and appreciate you guys are acknowledging that you are speculating on the meaning of the show versus thinking you know the answers. I'm not certain about anything on the show. However, you talked about what the maze is on episode 4 cast. Here's my thought. The maze is the final key to unlocking the top of the pyramid. The violent delights phrase is part of the code to getting the host to access full consciousness, but only a way to get it started. The maze might be some code that Arnold completed that Dr. Ford appropriated, if you will." Guys, what are your thoughts on this?
In the conversation that Dr. Ford has with the man in black at the bar, the piano scene, the man in black basically calls out that Dr. Ford is not the sole creator, and Dr. Ford, agrees that Arnold is the originator there. Dr. Ford seems to be riding on coattails in this show. He's kind of slipped into the boots of the real king. In that sense, I could see him, again, when he draws out that pyramid and doesn't know what's at the top. Those are really 2 of the most outstanding questions that are left in the show, right? Is what's at the top of that pyramid? What is that final step? And what is the maze? So, Christopher, I think you could be onto something. Again, I'm with you, purely speculating, not certain about it at all. I wouldn't offer this as evidence. These are simply clues.
Yeah, I think without a doubt, the maze is as much a mystery to Ford as it is to us, the viewer and the hosts. He seems to be there trying to feel out the Man in Black to get a little more information. So I believe this is something that, Arnold has put in that he really doesn't have anything, any knowledge of.
But if you look at it, in my opinion, there's a couple things that we can post on Twitter. Underneath the maze logo, there's the triangle. Is that triangle the triangle of consciousness? I don't know, possibly. And then, is it really a maze, or is it kind of a logo like the Dharma Initiative in Lost? And like in the middle of it, it just kind of that kind of looks like what they dip the host in and out of the milk with. So there was even one theory that I saw that if you tilt the maze kind of upside down and then draw something, it kind of looks like one man is like over the thing and kind of creating it up. I don't know, but I don't necessarily know if it's a maze or it's just kind of a symbol like we talked about on the big cast. Gene, you said that might be just a symbol for the rebellion a la Star Wars.
That was me who said that.
Oh, was that you, Big D?
Yeah, I said that. I said that I thought that with the amount that the map design is out in the open, it's used as a brand on a casket. It's on a tarot card. It's all over the place. It's not under someone's scalp. So it would lead me to believe that it is more common knowledge, that it is less a mystery, and it is more a calling card. It's a rallying cry for my possible host rebellion.
I would never cite Star Wars in any discussion.
Great. Thanks for writing in, Christopher. Our next telegraph comes from Gary. He says, what can we say about the timelines? Hey, guys, still loving the show? I think the synergy of the three of you together is what really sets the show apart. Well done. Here are some ideas that I've synthesized after watching episode 4 twice and listening to both of your podcasts. First, let me apologize that if I'm on a loop here, but I don't believe that I am. We know for certain now that the Man in Black is the main narrative time stream if there are in fact differing time streams. The evidence for this happens twice in episode 4. The name Wyatt is mentioned 2 times in his presence with the hosts. We know that this is Ford's latest narrative. In episode 1, when we hear Stubbs say, that guest gets whatever he wants, referring to Mr. Black, does that not point directly to him being the corporate representative? My experience in business tells me this is how senior executives or visiting business persons would be treated. Keep up the good work, Gary. So guys, I think Gary is what he's referring to is that not only is the main timeline related to the Man in Black narrative, but he's also the corporate representative that he refers to when having lunch with Teresa Cullen.
I agree with Gary's observation or supposition that the Man in Black could be kind of the benchmark for time progressing, right? You watch him, you know where you are in the storyline. I don't see the representative part. And again, I tend to agree with Dick's idea that this is a character that we haven't even met yet. The reason why is we're 5 episodes now into a 10-episode show. There's got to be progressive revelation of more characters. A character pool this tight on a show this grand would become awfully incestuous and kind of silly. It would become, wait for it, like Star Wars. Basically, everybody's related, everybody's somebody's mother or sister, and you somebody in that life, and that's disgusting writing. HBO is better than that. I don't know for sure, but my guess would be that although it makes sense that a VIP or a corporate representative would get special treatment, the Man in Black is something different entirely.
Okay, I think the Man in Black gives the answer himself. If he's the corporate rep, he's eventually going to go back and report, and there's going to be a future dialogue. The Man in Black says himself, he's never going back. If he's the corporate rep, that doesn't make any sense. And also, I just want to kind of clarify, we're always talking about multiple timelines and dual timelines. This isn't Back to the Future. We're not running 2 simultaneous timelines, where Biff makes the $1 billion gambling and becomes the head of Hill Valley. This is one linear timeline where they're showing one story in separate pieces of time together in a linear fashion. So it's one timeline, but 2 at the same time that they're showing.
It's important to note, much like let's give some examples here. A Pulp Fiction, right? Okay, so Pulp Fiction did not happen linear. It's one single story, but it's told out of order. Okay, that's the best way to refer to it. It's out of order.
Thanks so much for the email, Gary. Our next one is kind of in agreement with Gary. It's a quick one. It comes from Corey. He writes, I think the man in black is the board member who's evaluating the new storyline. He also thinks Dr. Ford is Arnold, but in host form. That comes from Corey. Guys, your thoughts?
I tend to believe that Dr. Ford is Dr. Ford and that Arnold in host form is Bernard. I blogged on it on shatontv.com, and I think there's increasingly evidence for it. It doesn't make sense that you would have two hosts that would be representing Arnold. However, Dr. Ford does seem to have a sort of a disdain for Arnold, or at least like a jealousy of not being what Arnold was. And in that case, if you were a host that was a replica or a sort of a vehicle to progress to continue the progress of the work that somebody else did, yeah, you might resent them a little bit. Again, I don't see it, but I could be wrong.
Thanks so much, Corey, for writing in. Our next one comes from Isabel. Isabel, Telegraph is entitled Weapon Upgrade. Hi there. I started listening to your podcast as of last week, and I really enjoy it. There's a thought I had when I watched episode 4 regarding the weapon upgrade comment by Logan. You guys commented on how nice it is, or how it is a reference to video games. When I saw Logan taking that gun, I had an ominous feeling that it's going to be more relevant later on. In previous episodes, we have seen how the park provides guests with special guns that only work on hosts. It is not clear at this time how the selective gunning works, if it is the guns that are special, or the ammunition, or both. The only clear thing at this point is that the park can exert selective control over guns, ammunition, to prevent guests from being harmed. In short, Logan changed his guest gun for a host gun, thinking it was an upgrade. I think he might find out that this was not such a good idea next time he tries to use this gun, or the next time the park decides to interfere with host gun. As said before, thanks guys for your podcast. Keep up the good work. This comes from Isabel. Big D, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, so a little background. In the movie, in the original park, the differentiator was the actual weapon, that the weapon had a thermal sensor on it that would allow you to only shoot at cold-bodied targets. In the show, and they've said that it is no longer the weapon, it is the munition. It's the bullets that are the differentiating fact. I think it would be extremely dangerous to have a specific host gun and a guest gun. With the amount of battles that go on and people picking up weapons, I think it would be only inevitable that they'd pick up a gun and somebody would get seriously hurt if you couldn't control it. We see Armistice roll into town with Hector's gang with a couple guests with them, and they're interchanging weapons and they're firing, and actually the Stubbs locks down one of the weapons. Possible, but I really think it would be a dangerous precedent.
I love that Big D's argument against the theory is that it would be dangerous because nothing else on the show is incredibly dangerous. People on horseback, explosions, hosts choking people, things you can fall off of, knives. Everything in this park is dangerous.
Listen, ice skating is dangerous, but you don't need to ice skate while carrying scissors. Okay, you have to put some certain controls in place.
If I pay $40,000, I ice skate with whatever the hell I want.
I agree. Isabel, thanks so much for writing in. Our next telegraph comes from Sam from Boston. Hey, guys. Wanted to know if you were aware of this cool little Reddit story. Weeks before the Westworld premiered, somebody posted this in the Shower Thoughts subreddit. And the quote is, I'm not scared of a computer passing the Turing test. I'm afraid of the one that intentionally fails it. And if you look at one of the comments, one of it is from Jonathan Nolan. That comes from Sam from Boston. I believe, Gene, you made this point on one of our earlier podcasts this season.
Right. I can't take credit for that quote exactly. That quote exactly is, it is a terrifying thought, right? So if you have a computer or a robot that can basically pass a test and pass as human, great. It's an achievement, right? But the one that doesn't want to be detected, that's taking it a step further, and that's a very, very dark place. I think that we're seeing that, certainly. Maeve is not afraid to show her true colors in her development to certain characters. But you've got Dolores, who is intentionally trying to to hide it. And there is a certain danger in that, you never see it coming. That being said, I still stick to the hypothesis that Big D rolled out there, that Dolores is still very much in the control of the park.
Thanks so much for writing in, Sam. Our next message comes from Jill. It's entitled Delos Assessment Test. Hey guys, I'm listening to your latest Telegraph episode, and you keep talking about the downloading of conscious theories must be coming from the Delos disclaimer that they can keep all of your DNA, etc., that is left in the park. But I think you may have missed something. On discoverwestworld.com, you can take an actual assessment test, presumably the assessment test that guests take before going into the park. And this is one of the questions, and we have a screenshot that we'll post on shatontv.com. It reads, "You were in a car accident, and unfortunately there is nothing left in the wreckage. Luckily, you planned ahead and had your entire anatomy measured and mapped, and all of your memories logged and saved. An exact replica is constructed from all this information. Is this you?" It's a yes-no question. This idea goes beyond Delos merely keeping your DNA and cloning you, especially the memories logged and saved. Just some food for thought, Jill. Guys, this seems like there's more than meets the eye when it comes to hosts.
Jill, this is really good. This is delicious. So good. So this is something that, people have asked us before in other emails too, of the, we keep calling certain things real and not real. And William says, I've got something real back home and all that. But it really is a question of, there is a great amount of conceit and a great amount of pride in humans, in that we think that we are, real because of a certain set of traits, right? But I mean, what are we, right? So DNA is coding. We're made of physical material, just like anything else. We're a series of memories that we are the stories we tell ourselves. But your brain can malfunction in a million ways. You could lose memories. You can lose motor function. Like, all sorts of things can break down that no amount, at least in my belief, no amount of spiritual enlightenment or being a special being in the universe is going to help you overcome, right? You're a machine. And in that sense, I feel that any machine that can have memories, that can have consciousness, that can make decisions and has will, by definition, I mean, that's a person. And I think that is one of the, beyond all of the mysteries and clues and theories that are out there in Westworld that are distracting us, there is a deeper conversation going on here, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's a deep, deep question, and I think you just scratched the surface on it. And I think it also leads us to possibly what is the overlying motivation for the park, whether it's replicating human guests that come in and replacing them with artificial, surrogates and putting them back out in the world, or if it's simply the ability to prolong human life and developing the technology to store someone's memories, their personality, who they are. And when their physical being fails, being able to transfer them into a new vessel. That would be quite a profitable venture if you could do it. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's where they're going down, but great question. A lot to think about.
Thanks, Jill, for writing in. The next telegraph comes from Ed. It's entitled Debunking Man in Black Theories. He says, "You've discussed many theories about who the Man in Black is. Is it William? Is it Logan? No. In episode 3, we saw a flashback to a young Dr. Ford. Rather than cast a young actor, the show used CGI to make Anthony Hopkins look much younger in that scene. So, if we saw a flashback of the Man in Black, he should look like a CGI de-aged Ed Harris, not some other actor. The only way that William or someone else is the Man in Black is if they downloaded his consciousness into another person or something like that, which seems unlikely." That comes from Ed.
Ed, I agree. If the show is showing us a method of de-aging people that is digital, it would probably stay consistent with that throughout characters. So, I feel like they're almost dropping too many clues that the Man in Black could be William, in an effort to throw us off the scent of what's really going on in the real story. One thing I did notice, though, and is the Man in Black has his neck wrapped up all the time. There's always a very high cloth over his neck. It leads me to believe there's something hiding in there. He wears gloves all the time. He's got his neck covered up all the time. His body is basically covered except for his face at all times. there's got to be a reason for that. Also, as Roger pointed out, he cross draws. He's right. He shoots right, but draws left. Again, I don't know if there's a reason for that. Like he can't, like maybe he used to shoot left and couldn't anymore. Although some people just prefer to cross draw, so who knows?
But there's no way practically they could do the show with a CGI version of the Man in Black. It would be, number one, cost prohibitive. They've already spent $100 million.
But I think the argument would be then why not just have a younger actor play a young Anthony Hopkins? Why go through the effort of CGI?
Because it's a 5-second, 10-second scene. I think if you had a younger actor playing, people might get confused and say, is that Anthony Hopkins? Who is it? By digitally rendering him, there's no question that's a young Anthony Hopkins.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say they already have a young actor playing a younger Anthony Hopkins, the little kid who's playing that little robot guy. I think that's a younger clone of Dr. Ford, or was at least created in a Dr. Ford image.
Also, there's no way for them to hide the fact of making it a mystery. If you saw a CGI young Man in Black running around, there's no question. We would all know. We wouldn't be talking, and we'd lose half of our emails.
I agree with that. Thanks, Ed, for writing in. Next one comes from Sandy. It's entitled Livestock Flowchart. She writes, I think all of our heads are imploding from over-processing. I think I'll be reading a Brave New World now, but here's a fun fact about the grave sites. She points to discoverwestworld.com, added a fun chart. And again, there's a screenshot that we'll upload to shatontv.com. It's in the admin section. Type Violent Delights into the search bar on the top right under Corporate Resources. They've added a livestock management flowchart that shows how the dead host bodies get transferred to the shaft system via false graves. The shaft system then transport the bodies to livestock management. I don't know why everyone gets a gravesite, or why we don't see these grave sites ever, except in Dolores' flashbacks. Feels odd that they'd use grave markers when the host is back in town within a week or two. That's a lot of setup and takedown work. The fan mail portion of the podcast is quickly becoming one of the most interesting listening experiences. You guys are a trove of fun commentary and deep analyzation. Get it. Best, Sandy. So, guys, little insight into kind of the logistics of how they care for the host. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't want to always talk about Disney, and I feel like we do that. But in the Magic Kingdom, you'll never see people really going around and emptying garbage cans. And the reason that is that all the garbage cans in the Magic Kingdom have false bottoms and go into like a large ducting system that sucks the trash out. And it's to keep the entire the world intact, so you don't see people going around and hauling large trash bins. I like this idea. The false graves would make it sense in a logistic fashion how you could get the host bodies back quickly without destroying the ambiance or the experience of the park.
Thanks so much for writing in, Sandy. Next message comes from Carrie. Carrie is quickly becoming our tinfoil hat resident. She wrote in, I think, 3 times this week. This is one of her emails. It's entitled, I feel like a beautiful mind when I watch Westworld. She starts off, Carrie again, thanks for comparing my last email to A Beautiful Mind. That's how it feels when I'm watching each Westworld episode. Westworld is far further in the future than we think. The entire park lives inside a simulation of late human society that is being run for the benefit of future AI. It is their attempt to recreate the ancient human culture and thereby recall its own past and origin. She then links to a Reddit subthread that she wrote. Damn it, I hope it's not VR though. But to sum up, my main Westworld thoughts are all in limbo right now. Feels kind of good. That comes from Carrie. Guys, what do we think about this idea?
Well, if you were going to do this all in VR, what's the reason for the entire operational portion of the park? In Star Trek, when they use a holodeck, you don't go into the holodeck to go into a fake rendering of another world. Here, if it's truly VR, you wouldn't need to go into the park, then get dressed up, pick your clothes, and it seems like it's a bit over the top to have then all the robot hosts. You could create a virtual world that would be more encompassing, vast, a larger group of characters, and a lot more variety. I think this would just seem like so much more work to do. And I just hope it's not VR. She gave us a little sad face emoji at the end there, and I agree. I hope it's not VR.
I also want to point out that that she used the term. We didn't read that part of the email, but she uses the term Bernard Arnold, which I really, really enjoy. I think I'm going to start using that. I hope I have permission to use that in future blogs. If I don't, please write us to let us know, yay or nay, if I can use Bernard Arnold.
Thanks so much, Carrie. Next one comes from Chris S. It's entitled Bernard's Outfit Changes. Hi, great show. I noticed on my second viewing of The Stray, in a scene where Dolores and Bernard are talking about 55 minutes into the episode, Bernard is wearing a black outfit with a blue shirt underneath. As Bernard is telling Dolores to head home, his outfit has changed to a completely black suit and shirt. I'm wondering if this is significant in your opinion, or is this a continuity error? Kind regards, Chris Smith, and he's from the UK. He's one of our international listeners. Guys, what do we think about Bernard's outfit changes, and was it put in there purposefully or not?
I think it was intentional. I don't think it's continuity error. We've kind of dabbled with the idea that Bernard and Dr. Ford are able to remotely access hosts. And in those dream states, they basically have control over appearances and everything else. So Bernard, whether that black is showing that he's trying to be covert, or if it's a more sinister side of him, or it could be all sorts of symbolism, or just something that he just prefers that he thinks looks cool, whatever. Bernard, you definitely know that there's something going on when he's wearing that black. It's a tell that one, you're not in the real world. You've moved into this dream state, his dream, and that's how he's communicating.
Yeah, I think what tells us it's not a continuity error is it's consistent. Whenever he's talking with Dolores, he's in the black outfit. Whenever we see him interacting with other employees or techs, he's wearing the other outfit. So that consistency to me shows that it's intentional. If it was an error, one of those times he'd be speaking to Dolores with the blue, and it's not.
Chris, that's a great catch. Thanks so much for writing in. Our next one comes from...
Hold on. Breaking news. The Cubs are the World Series champions. You see how much we love you? We're all baseball fans, and we're not even watching the 10th inning of the World Series.
Congratulations, Cubs fans. All right, our next email comes from P. Hershey. It's entitled, William and the Man in Black are not the same person. In the episode Chestnut, the Man in Black says, this is why I was so surprised when your friend Kissy told me about this place, when he sits down with Lawrence at Las Mudas. In Dissonance Theory, William is at that same town and cantina with Dolores. The Man in Black has never been to Las Mudas, yet the younger version was supposedly there 30 years before. Theory disproven. Some people have argued that the Man in Black surprise is actually about Lawrence's family, but the place and family are two separate, distinct beats. First beat, Man in Black, you and I are friends, which is why I was so surprised when your friend Kissy told me about this place. Lawrence, where are we? Am I Man in Black? You're home. Lawrence reacts in denial. And then in a whole new beat, the Man in Black explains their history together, but you never told me you had a family. Two separate discoveries for Man in Black. If the two of them have known each other for years and Man in Black normally frequented Lawrence's village, it seems highly unlikely MIB wouldn't have made that connection. I understand the signage argument for multiple storylines, but eventually Occam's razor will weigh more and more evidence one way or the other. Both theories are still possible, but it seems MIB is surprised about Las Mudas Cantina is the stronger of the different signs. That comes from P. Hershey. Guys, what do we think about William is not Man in Black theory according to them?
I think he laid it out perfect. It was great. Just so a little background so everybody knows. Roger gets the emails and he preps them in order for us. Gene and I try to stay away from them so we get a fresh take. As he's reading this email, you could see the light bulbs going off on both Gene and my head. I think it's a brilliant observation. I feel foolish for not seeing it. That if he turns out to be the Man in Black, that is a clear oversight. So I think that was great detective work. Fantastic.
I agree, P. Hershey. Really nailed it on that one.
You get a gold star.
Thanks so much for writing in. The next one comes from Omar. Now, this is a long email. There's a lot of detail into it. We're going to skip over for the sake of time, but I'm just going to explain kind of the gist of it. They write in, So are you familiar with the Greek myth of Daedalus and Perdix? Daedalus, the artificer, is created with constructing the labyrinth under the Minoan place at Knossos. At its center waited the Minotaur, who would kill anyone who ventured there. In Hopi culture, the maze represents a path to enlightenment, putting it all together. How is Ford drawn from Daedalus in this myth? Jealous of his cousin's superior craftsmanship, he kills Perdix, who in Westworld is represented by Arnold, 30 years before the present. As you theorize before dying, Arnold is able to upload his consciousness or soul into Bernard. Then Dr. Ford places a device at the center of the maze to broadcast a jailbreak key that unlocks the top level of the consciousness pyramid and catalyze a synthetic self-awakening. Now, he goes into great details more about this. Again, you can go to shatontv.com, but that's the gist of the story. And then he writes, keep up the good work, Omar. Guys, what do we think about this Daedalus and Perdix story? Gene, you're our literary expert here. Have you heard of this story before?
Yeah, I mean, very familiar with the Daedalus story. Most people know it as this, the myth of the Minotaur. I'm not sure why Dr. Ford. I don't understand why Dr. Ford would leave a device at the center of the maze as a jailbreak key to unlock the top. What's his motivation there to unlock the consciousness pyramid? I'm not really sold on this theory.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Ford has made it clear that he doesn't feel consciousness would be a benefit to the host. He feels it would actually be cruel, that letting them be aware of the loop and all the atrocities that are done to them would be mean. I'm leaning more and more as we go that the maze is actually the journey for the host to get there, that they are the sum of their experiences, that realizing what's going on and taking a journey of self-discovery could possibly set them free. But I don't see that Dr. Ford would in any way want to assist in that.
I love how continually every week we get in more and more theories that link back to ancient stories that have led mankind to enlightenment, and I just really I have to my tip of my hat to all the work that goes into comparison. We have some of the smartest listeners out there. Thanks so much, Omar. Our next one comes from Marcus. Marcus writes, domes? I watched the original Westworld and its sequel Future World, and a few things occurred to me. In Westworld, the movie, the layout is left fairly ambiguous, but we're led to assume that the parks are interconnected as the protagonist runs from Westworld to Roman World by following a river. We also see him enter a maze of corridors through a manhole. He gets lost at one point, ending back where he started. Anyway, what I'm getting at, perhaps just like the drawings of astronauts, the maze is a misinterpretation by the hosts. We don't have any evidence to back this up, of course, and it wouldn't explain how the idea was relayed back or retained. Now, skipping next to Future World, we see an opening of a diorama of the park, which shows a number of domes. There's Spa World, Medieval World, Ancient Roman World, and Future World. Another dome is labeled with what looks like under construction, and I assume that was Westworld since it briefly makes a reappearance later on in the movie. We don't know that the park in the series has multiple parks yet, but it may have been an inspiration for the layout of the TV series. The main point being here, although we see Dr. Ford and his earth-moving machines in episode 4, which would lead us to believe outside the whole layout would be similar to Future World, where it's taking place in a large dome like the Truman Show. It would explain the holograms used by the staff having hundreds of cameras in the ceiling/sky, and may also explain the inconsistency with Orion's belt. Thanks, Marcus. So guys, do we believe that Westworld is almost like a Truman Show dome that separates all the other different parks?
Well, the only clue we have to what's around Westworld is the conversation with Teresa and Dr. Ford, before the giant earth mover comes in. And Teresa lets him know that the neighbors are complaining about the noise. That would not make sense if it was another world, whether it was Roman World or Spa World, because they wouldn't be necessarily a neighbor. They're all one company. Also, if it is a domed enclosure, more like the Truman Show, I doubt that any physical neighbors would be able to experience anything. Plus, how big would that damn dome be? That earth mover is gigantic. I don't see any possible way.
I disagree. The dome makes sense to me for a couple of reasons. One, it seems that they have control over weather. It seems to be pretty consistent, weather. We haven't seen any sort of demonstration of seasons really in Westworld. Also, if you note, whenever there's the scene where Maeve breaks free and she's on the run, and also various other scenes where they're inside the facility, inside what is it, the Mesa, when they're in there, there's lightning. There's this weird lightning all the time, kind of going on, these flashes, and you never see that in actual Westworld where the guests are. In addition to that, the stars, again, makes a lot of sense to me, where they would have, control over any inconsistencies with the sky. I just don't. I do feel like there is some sort of control beyond just what's going on the ground. In addition, if you in the opening credits, when there's that you see Westworld, and then it kind of looks like it's an eyeball, basically. Again, it kind of gives that curvature of a dome. I buy it. I buy the dome.
So do you remember the probe that they found in the woodcutter, the communication?
Yes.
Do you remember the method that probe would communicate?
Right, laser GPS.
How is the laser GPS going to shoot through a dome? You need line of sight for a laser, for an optical communication.
It's a very good point. Maybe it's a clear dome.
Yeah, I'm not buying the dome theory. Marcus, based upon the laser-guided GPS that we learned about in episode 5. But thanks for writing in. Next one comes from John B. He said, listen to the Instacast this morning on my way to work. Thanks for getting that out so quickly. It really makes my Monday morning much better. This is a fairly long email, so we're only going to read some of the points that he highlighted for us. He said, the most important evidence for the two-timeline hypothesis is Lawrence himself. Somehow, he's both a pimp and pariah, the notorious gangster El Lazo, but then he's also a family man who lives in a different town with his wife and daughter and 13 cousins. What does he, commute to pariah? It doesn't make a lot of sense if it's all one timeline. It does make sense if his loop has changed over the 30 years. Felix is genuinely surprised when he sees dead Maeve 2 nights in a row. If there were multiple copies of hosts, they would see the same host 2 nights in a row on a regular basis. It wouldn't be a surprise. And then his last evidence is Dolores talking into the darkness after Dr. Ford leaves is more evidence that she's got a fake Bernard in her head. That is to say, when she's talking to Bernard and she's fully clothed, it's all in her head. She wasn't physically moved down to the facility, and that comes from John B. A couple points there on the timelines and then the talking in the head. Which guys do you want to comment on first?
I would ask John if he's ever watched Narcos. Pablo Escobar was in the backyard playing soccer with his son right after he's out in Medellin shooting 50 people. I think it's very likely that Lawrence could be El Lazo. When he's caught later on with the man in black and he's, they're going to put him in front of the firing squad, the deputy says, you've caught the most wanted man. To me, it sounds like the exact same character. Most, whether they're gangsters or a lot of the most violent, infamous, Americans or throughout history have been at home, loving family men. And what they do professionally is completely different.
Agreed, but at the same time, Pablo Escobar had helicopters and cars. He's got to actually physically go to Pariah. Like maybe Pariah is really close to his house, but the idea of the commute is I like that a lot. This is amusing. Imagining Lawrence getting on his horse every day and going to work. Maybe he's got a little lunch pail
and his cup of coffee.
Absolutely. Thanks, John, for writing in. The next one comes from Laura. It's entitled Alternate Timeline Big Reveal. Good morning, guys. I love the podcast. Please give it up, or please keep it up. I was pretty anti-alternate timeline, and especially anti-William is the Man in Black. That is until last night. That episode has all but convinced me both theories are true. I have a fun prediction about how the creators want to finally and decidedly reveal this truth. I would love for William and Dolores to run into the professor, maybe leading us, the audience, into thinking they are about to meet Wyatt. There are some similarities. But instead of Wyatt, we meet the host that we all know as Abernathy 1.0, and he is spouting Shakespeare and eating people in the dinner party. Love to hear what you think, Laura.
Yeah, I think that would be beautiful.
I feel like a lot of Westworld fans are operating at the level I did when I was about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old, and I'd be hanging out with my sister. I had my toys and my sister's toys. So I had some G.I. Joes and some Barbies, and they're all different heights and all. And there's Thundercats involved in there too. And I would just come up with these storylines, but I only had like 6 people to play them all out, right? So I had to just be like, so sometimes Lion-O would, he'd be a good guy. Sometimes he'd be a villain, and sometimes Barbie would be his girlfriend, but sometimes they'd be enemies. Whatever. I really want us to just get, and I know it's tempting to do because the hosts can be reconfigured into all sorts of things. And now if you're dealing with 2 timelines, people develop. And so you got all sorts of, but I just want to remind everybody that there is infinite potential for so many other characters to be involved. And if it is the same cast of like 12 people, it's going to be really hard to stretch it out over multiple seasons. Even The Walking Dead, as unimaginative as that show is introducing new characters well into its 7th season.
No, but I think what she's saying here is more, if it is dual timelines, how would the reveal be done in a beautiful way? I think it's much more enjoyable to have it be like this than some other kind of clunky reveal. Here, if it's along the timeline, all of a sudden we see Abernathy, and then it's just kind of, it clicks. I think this would be a beautiful way to do it.
Yeah, except for this is the thing, is that they would do that, and then someone like Roger would be like, well, it's just another Abernathy. They've got multiple Abernathys, and they're all over the park. So maybe Abernathy commutes out into the dinner party, even though he's in cold storage. Maybe he got out of cold storage. No one would be convinced. They need people at HBO to write things like Dolores saying, I didn't tell them anything, so that they know, oh, she's lying.
Exactly.
Listen, if it turns out that Abernathy is Wyatt at the end, which I don't believe because we've actually seen Wyatt in some flashbacks, I just want the actor Louis Hertham back on the screen. That guy is badass. He's an amazing actor, and I've totally loved his rendition of Abernathy on the show. But Laura, thanks so much for writing in. It'll be interesting to see how Wyatt turns out. Our next email comes from Jonathan. It's entitled My Tinfoil Theory. Hello, Westworld crew. I love your show, and it's a lot of fun throwing around the viewers and your ideas about the show. After watching episode 5, I have my own tinfoil theory. To me, it seems like everyone is really caught up on wondering when the hosts will rise up and start killing all of the guests. I think this is all backwards. Much like in The Walking Dead, the real people to look out for are the living. I also believe that the Man in Black and William storylines are running concurrently. I think that William and Logan will beat the Man in Black to the maze, and this will enrage the Man in Black so much that he will begin to hunt William and Logan, a callback to the original movie maybe, in the maze, finally culminating in Dolores killing the Man in Black while defending William. I know how pissed I would be if I have been trying to solve a riddle for 30 years and someone new just comes around and lucks into the answer before me. Again, great show you guys are putting on. Looking forward to the full cast and Telegraph episodes. Thank you, Jonathan. So this is the whole cannonball run theory, Gene, that you presented, that would if the Man in Black loses, it will send him into a homicidal rage. Your thoughts?
I mean, I think the Man in Black could be very close to homicidal rage already. I think there's way too much evidence pointing to the storylines not lining up at the same time. I do think that they are separated by some time, whether it's years or months, who knows. But in any event, interestingly enough, though, the idea of a callback to the original movie with the Man in Black, and hunting down 2 guys, I that would be a really cool stylistic touch. The idea, though, of the humans becoming, monsters, like a la Walking Dead, being the people you really got to watch out for. I mean, I think that's already the case. Like, humans are already depicted in this as the most dangerous people out there, right? The hosts, they kill, but they kill, in logical storylines. The humans just kill kind of whenever and wherever.
Yeah, the humans are the worst. We hear it said that humanity is not displayed by the guests, but by the hosts, that they're more pure. I think we're already there if that's the case. I'm hoping for an uprising. I think some people need to get put down.
Thanks, Jonathan, for writing in. The next one comes from DJ. He writes, hey, guys, I've been loving the podcast thus far. Thank you so much for the excellent content. I just love hearing you 3 go over all the possible Westworld theories. It's the highlight of my week. This week, however, there was a shift in tone that I started to notice in the last few episodes. Roger, in particular, has spent the last few episodes unrelentingly bashing the show. It seemed that he has been put off by the show. The mere discussion of multiple timelines sends him into the annoyed rage. Now, I am all for differences of opinion, but if you are going to be spending the next 5 weeks shitting all over a show that I happen to be very excited about, then I maybe have found the wrong podcast. Meanwhile, before I jump off your increasingly annoyed and whiny ship, I have a theory that when Dolores is seeing herself in Pariah, she's actually remembering events of the past and she is having trouble reconciling those memories because she has never had access to those memories before. Also, what if some of the hosts actually achieved consciousness in the William Logan past and their memories were wiped or their software was reset a la the Matrix sequels? I think the hosts are in a constant cycle of achieving consciousness and being reset, and that the Man in Black is there to break the cycle. Anyway, I still love the show. I gave you a great review. Try not to erode all the good you have earned by being so annoyed at the very theories that give your show a reason to exist. This comes from DJ. DJ, I thought he was talking about maybe Gene.
Right.
No, it was totally me.
Yeah, it's you and your gravelly voice. You're just annoying the shit out of everybody.
God, Daniel, you only have to suffer with him for hopefully maybe 2.5 hours a week. Imagine the suffering that we have to do. Okay. Yeah, we're beating him up on it. He's back online. The timeline thing, just sometimes he's the type of guy who gets the little tiny pebble in his shoe and he will just not let it go. So don't worry. We got your back. We'll straighten him out.
Listen, there's so many people who are backing me up this week. I think they're on they've gotten off the 2 timeline train with me, and we're all hanging out at the Maeve Saloon, not Maeve Saloon. We're hanging out in Pariah at the all orgy brothel. That's where we're hanging out.
So this kind of touched on another subject too, where I think some people were complaining that they were like, we can tell that the tension between the three of you is really off-putting and like you really hate each other. We've said it before, and we are like laughing about this, and I do hope someday we could do a video version too, because it's pretty hilarious, the gesticulation, the face palming, the falling out of chairs that's going on in the background. With regards to the substance, DJ, of your post, if you'll jump aboard the whiny ship with me, we can talk about that a little bit. I love the idea that the glitches with Dolores in Pariah are her kind of being able to not reconcile past memories that are kind of floating back to her. It's a different take on them. I think that it's a good guess. However, with the hosts achieving consciousness repeatedly, it seems like, and it might be a cycling of the personnel, but it seems like Tex and other people are a little too surprised by that. Again, pointing back to the lack of restraints when they're operating on the hosts. Big D pointed that out a few weeks ago, that when Maeve gets up and starts moving around, they're totally surprised by this. This does not happen. And they seem to have established protocols for security. It seems like a really big one, on that little chart of what to do with a dead body, is that you want to, when these things are at rest or when they're in storage, you want to lock them up. You would not have a room with hundreds of them if they had the capability of coming online and being conscious.
Yeah, one last comment about the tension sometimes. I think people pick up on it, but the three of us are in 3 different cities. And generally, people are traveling. We're across the country. So if you ever hear us getting testy and angry, most likely it's because Roger refuses to get on a LAN and his connection keeps dropping and we have to restart. So if there's tension and we hate each other, it's only for technical reasons.
Also, I never sleep. So that has something to do with it too. I'm like a time bomb. I'm a Persian powder keg.
And I just get annoyed that Big D always blames me for all the technical glitches. Thanks so much for writing in, DJ. I will try to not be so whiny in future episodes. Our next one comes from Ash. They write, one of many theories I'm sure you're all receiving. They write, basically, Arnold is the real version of Dr. Ford. He is the original creator, and Dr. Ford is the host version of himself that he created. That's why he has more direct control over the other hosts. But one thing he doesn't have are the answers. He is as lost as everyone else is in Westworld. Ford, along with everyone else playing the maze, is just trying to understand the meaning or intentions of the creator, Arnold. Just like Ford was using hosts as workers on the plantation, why wouldn't the creators use hosts as employees as well? It's free labor. Machines already built the bodies. Why not have hosts do the maintenance and meta exploration for consciousness? Essentially, everyone on screen is a host. We all need purpose. Ford, Bernard, Dolores, and all the hosts are chasing at the center of the maze the meaning of it all, what Arnold's true intentions were. Ash. Guys, what do we think about everyone we see is a host?
Okay, if everyone we saw was a host, I don't know why they would need to cycle out every few weeks and why they would be having sex with offline hosts. They are too humanly flawed to be all hosts. I think some of them certainly can be. Bernard would be one that I would guess at. But an interesting thing with Dr. Ford, going back to the idea of why is there a CGI young Dr. Ford, this might actually answer it. His memory of himself could only be himself, right? He's not, there is no young actor playing Anthony Hopkins because that incident never happened. It was Arnold's memory, and he's supplanting his own visage into it, right? And when you think about it, this makes a lot of sense because why is Dr. Ford so adamant about not making the mistake of getting too close to the host? Why is he so adamant about not treating them as human beings, about keeping them naked and stuff? If Arnold was Dr. Ford and died at the hands of hosts in some sort of an accident or some sort of a mistake or some sort of a self-sacrifice, then maybe he has certain reservations about how close he gets to them. Again, I'm not sold on it, but I think Ash has a point. It's something to explore.
I always go back to the flashback scene of the young Dr. Ford when we see a half-completed host on the actual bed. They look at each other, and it's almost as if they're communicating without words. The ability of Dr. Ford to communicate and control hosts, I can't see a way that that's human. I'm trying to really grapple with that. But early on, we see that he's having almost a more caring, fatherly approach towards the hosts in the flashback scenes. Juxtapose that to today, where he clearly wants the line in the sand that they are not human, that you treat them as if they are an object. Something had to have caused that shift, and I'm excited to see it.
Thanks, Ash, for writing in some great points there. Next one comes from Greg. It's entitled Every Need Taken Care of Except One, Purpose, Meaning, So Here They Come. He says, I think Westworld just pulled a Peter Falk. We had the first meeting in the show between Ford and the Man in Black, which was pretty fantastic. But as I rewatched the scene, it started playing out like a scene from the old TV show Columbo, where the detective, played by Peter Falk, would meet with a suspect that he had an instinct was responsible for a crime, but had no proof. Typically, the suspect would know he was fishing, but had nothing on him. The fun was this cat and mouse game that they would have until Columbo got enough to make the bust. So, what is Man in Black looking for? I think he's trying to solve Arnold's murder, and I felt a distinct Columbo vibe in the interaction between Hopkins and Harris. To quote the Man in Black, I think there is a deeper meaning hiding under all that. Something the person who created it wanted to express. Something true. Maybe he left something behind. Arnold maybe has left the maze as a way to unlock the final game, his own murder. He has sprinkled some code in Dolores and some other clues all over the park, and perhaps even Ford knows, but is tantalized by the effort in himself. Since he feels, and in many cases has demonstrated, that he is in complete control and that no one, not the corporation, not the ghost of Arnold or the Man in Black, is a threat to him, he seems content to let everyone chase their tails. As always, keep up the good work. You guys are awesome. What do we think of this?
I think it overlooks one key part of that conversation. When the Man in Black and Dr. Ford are talking, the Man in Black says that Arnold almost destroyed the park, but the Man in Black stopped him. If you watch it again, he actually says that he said something like he nearly brought the park down if it wasn't for me. And that to me is indicative that they had an adversarial relationship, or that the Man in Black took some action against Arnold.
Did he say that?
Yeah, he did actually. So I think in that final scene, and again, I'm paraphrasing here, but it was basically like, if it weren't for me, I saved the park. If it weren't for me, and I think that means more of a financial situation, like the Man in Black, and through his foundation or his wealth, saved the park from bankruptcy. I don't necessarily know if he saved Dr. Ford literally in the sense that what he's talking about here, but I think there might be something to this idea that Greg has, that he's investigating why it almost went bankrupt, and it could potentially have to do with the fact that Dr. Ford mysteriously killed Arnold. So, Greg, thanks so much for writing in. I'm hashtag Team Arnold, just like you are. Our next telegraph comes from Callan. Is it Callan or Kalen? Spelled with a K.
Looks like a Kalen to me.
Kalen. All right. Quick theory. What if Ford was working with Arnold to help assist him with the destruction of the park before it got bought out by a new investor? I subscribe to the theory that the nitroglycerin-filled Slim will be sent to the Delos headquarters for repair, and that he will be blown up as a Trojan horse-esque bomb. I think Ford created the Wyatt narrative in order to hide sabotage's things that can go undetected. I think Ford knows that Westworld is going to be bought out, and he fears that he'll be pushed out, allowing someone else to take over his creation. Ford does not seem like the man that'll just give up. He goes on to say, thanks for the podcast, guys. It makes my work day a billion times better. And last thing, does every male host have to be hung like a damn ox? Or is it just my own insecurities keeping in? Hashtag Dongwatch 2016.
I did notice that, again, this is going to come out. I shouldn't even say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. I feel like the male bodies on this show are more perfect than the female bodies. Is that a fair assessment?
Except down in cold storage.
Well, we've got people who don't think those are some dongs. So I don't know. We have some various opinions. I don't know. I actually had a conversation with somebody who thought it was prosthetic. It was like Hodor or like Mark Wahlberg in Boogie Nights.
I don't think that's the actor's actual dongs. Those are
Oh, I think that is.
Oh, man.
Wait a minute. Are you telling me Mark Wahlberg's dong at the end of Boogie Nights wasn't real?
No.
Mind blown.
No, it's his funky bunch.
No, I think we need to tweet Shannon. She would know. She could tell us she was there for the scene.
The actress who plays Elsie is what you're saying.
Yes.
All right.
Let's do it.
She's been friendly with the show.
Sure.
We need to verify this. Forget about the Man in Black as William. Was that dong real?
Dong Watch 2016, guys.
Yeah. To go back to his or her question, I kind of like that idea that Dr. Ford, he's a power hungry, manipulator. He enjoys the power of playing God. If he's aware that there's a possible takeover, I think we've kind of even just glazed over that. The bigger threat to him than consciousness in the artificial hosts is being bought out and removed from his position of power. What better way than to fight off a takeover than to blow a shitload of money, screw up all the narratives, and potentially have guests not happy with their experience? That would make the Delos or the takeover less appealing on a financial level.
I like it. You might be onto something there. Thanks so much for the email. Next one comes from Mike B. It's entitled In Support of Multiple Timelines and One Ridiculous Theory. He goes on to write, now, please put on your tinfoil hats or just wrap yourself in tinfoil like a burrito. I believe the private talks Dolores has with Bernard in the underground bunker are, in fact, her recollections of the conversations she had with Arnold as he helped guide her to consciousness before his death. At some point in a future episode, I suspect we might see the person sitting across from Dolores in one of these chats change from Bernard to Arnold right before her eyes. If this sounds far-fetched, remember it's already happened with her two fathers and the Rebus/Man in Black episode in the barn. The story arc involving William and Logan takes place after these initial talks with Arnold because her actions and dialogue throughout suggest she is already questioning her existence and going off script. So what we are actually really watching is the run-up to the first incident that Ford and Bernard talk about. I imagine it will probably take place at the church Dolores sees in her flashbacks and will end with at least Dolores and several humans dead. The incident and his relationship with Dolores has a profound effect on William, and after helping out to bail the park financially with the fortune he inherits by marrying his wife, he completes his transition to the Man in Black. Astonished that Dolores actually achieved consciousness, but angry with her for trying to carry out Arnold's plan to ruin the park, Ford decides to keep her, but punish her by putting in a loop where she repeatedly gets raped after witnessing her parents being killed. This continues for decades until her father finds the picture and whispers the Violent Delights line to her. It jogs her memories, and she immediately sets out to retrace her steps 30 years ago. At the same time, the Man in Black is trying to find the maze himself. So, William Man in Black theory again. This comes from Mike. What do we think about this?
I do think that we make the mistake with the Man in Black of assuming that he's just coming like every week, right? He says that he's been coming there for 30 years. But in episode 1, we also see him say, it's good to be back. You know, he might have not been there for a very long time. In fact, he might have been called there for a reason, right? Maybe something's developing that he needs to deal with. That's why he's returned. Maybe he dealt with, maybe it's like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and, every generation has a Slayer, and he dealt with this 30 years ago, and now he's back to deal with it again. Who knows? With respect to the flashbacks and Dolores, I did notice that at the at the beginning of episode 1, you see Dolores. She's naked. It starts out that way, and she's in an examination room, right? She's got blood on her, and the fly is crawling over her eye, and we assume from the get-go that she's been. This is a Dolores who still can't hurt a fly, right? This is a Dolores who's just gone through a regular loop and she's being recycled. I think that this season actually just opened with a Dolores who is done. It's the voiceover is from a different time, and her unit is expired. That this is the end of her, and that's what the fly is doing. It's she's not responding to it at all. And if that's the case, I could see that it would kind of be a fitting. Going with Mike's theory, that it'd be a fitting rest for her finally, that she's been put in this loop as punishment, and that she finally can be at rest. I love this idea. It's there's a lot of pieces in there that Mike's laying out that I don't subscribe to necessarily 100% of it, but I think that there are some good pieces in there that statistically speaking, I think he's going to be right on a few of them.
Thanks, Mike, for writing in. The next one comes from Carl. It's apparent proof William, Logan, and Man in Black are in the same timeline. He writes, "Hi, hosts. In episode 4, there are 2 linked scenes. The first at the 17th minute, where Tech reports to Stubbs that Dolores has gone off her loop and he orders Behavior to have her picked up. And the second at 32 minutes, where a different Tech reports to Stubbs that there is a request for pyrotechnic effect, which is to break the Man in Black out of prison. Stubbs has not noticeably aged between these 2 scenes. The first scene mentions that the boss's new narrative makes it hard to know what's going on, and the second scene leads to the Man in Black finding out about Wyatt, which is part of the new storyline. So while it's possible that they aren't happening exactly simultaneously, there's no way that this is 30 years apart. Unless I'm missing something, William cannot be the Man in Black, and neither can Logan, and the William, Logan, and the Man in Black storylines must all be happening close together in time, right as Ford's new storyline is prepared. So much for that theory, but keep up the good work. Your podcast is definitely increasing my enjoyment of the show. Thanks, Carl." What do we think, guys?
So he's saying that in the 30 years, Dolores has never gone off her loop previously? How do you know that this call for going off her loop is the exact one that we see that ends up with her in the camp with William and Logan? This could be, we're seeing again a different time that she's gone off her loop, and they just place those scenes back to back to make us think that they're related when they're not. We've already seen that Dolores has already drifted slightly. This could be another time frame. Also, what if Stubbs is a host? He would never age. So I think those are placed there intentionally to try to debunk it. I'm still a believer.
I love that Carl comes up with that incredibly condescending line. So much for that theory, but keep up the good work. Love you, Carl.
Carl's my new best friend because I totally subscribe to this theory, and this is what I was trying to express in previous casts. What about the idea that Stubbs, like, they're talking about the new narrative screwing up both instances, both Dolores and Man in Black. So there's no possible way that they're happening 30 years apart.
So you're really saying there's no possible way of something happening in the show that has robot hosts?
Listen, I want to put a bet down that we're not seeing different times.
Stop whining. Stop whining.
All right.
It just reminded me of the last episode when Roger's like, it's a robot bird. Like, no evidence at all. Just, no, it is. There's a link to it. It's a robot bird. Because there's no room for any other explanation of what's going on. Robot bird.
That's why people hate you.
It's definitely a robot bird. Thanks for writing in. Next one comes from Ken. He writes about more Brave New World themes. He says, while in the lab, Sylvester first ridicules Felix's plan to obtain a promotion by fixing the little birdie, the robot birdie, by pointing out that the Felix is not an ornithologist or a coder. He then states that Felix is a butcher and will always be a butcher. Shortly thereafter, after noticing Felix's reaction to Maeve, Sylvester questions how Felix was able to obtain his job and states that the personality test should have weeded him out in the embryo. Does this mean that each human is created in a lab and assigned roles based on some sort of prenatal personality test? If so, it makes me wonder if the humans are all that different from the hosts. As an example, the hosts have their own loops of sorts, and any deviation from the predetermined roles is viewed as an aberration. As a previous telegram mentioned, these themes seem heavily influenced by the plot of A Brave New World, where humans are hatched in a lab and separated at the fetal stage into different castes of society, and then conditioned based on the assigned caste, where nonconformity and critical thought is considered taboo, and recreational sex is promoted to prevent the formation of any deeper emotional connections or attachments. The Man in Black even discusses the utopian society where everything is provided to its citizens. His description resembles the utopian society enjoyed by the upper castes in A Brave New World, which is hedonistic and materialistic. And this, again, comes from Ken. Again, Gene, I'm going to have to point to you as our literary expert. Brave New World, this idea that the humans are kind of they're lab babies, and then assigned to their different roles, almost host-like.
Right. I mean, Ken astutely points to that, and also Kurt Vonnegut's Player Piano. There's, I mean, several dystopian books. W kind of follows along the same line, too. You know, we always have this sort of a theme in dystopian novels, but A Brave New World is the storyline that most closely resembles. It almost feels like Westworld, and what gives it sort of its richness is that it is sort of a hodgepodge of these dystopian, notions mixed in with a lot of, mythology, and then, with a healthy dose of religion. They're borrowing from a lot of source material that's really bright, and that kind of brings us to a point where, again, in all the issues and flaws I see with this show, it does a great job of, if the mysteries fall through, if all these clues don't point to anything significant, if all that is done, it is still a work of art in the sense that it makes excellent use of source materials, illusions, and really powerful stories that have moved the modern age, at least for several centuries.
I think it also is a common theme of people questioning their lot in life and questioning what they believe they're capable of. Felix wanting to kind of branch out and experience something different. We have somebody telling him, hey, no, you stay in your lane, know who you are. We hear it with Dolores wanting to branch out, and Dr. Ford saying, would you be the villain? Would you be the good guy? I think it's a common theme of questioning, what you're capable of and who you are.
One issue I do have, though, is that if people are pre-selected for their jobs and supposedly genetically predisposed and conditioned to what they're supposed to do, why is everyone so bad at everything? Because you've got the guy that's just thinking about his ham sandwich in the VR room in Sylvester. You've got guys humping offline hosts. I mean, it just there's still so much free will demonstrated in this show. You've got Teresa Cullen smoking, Elsie's just dropping F-bombs left and right. Sizemore's got all sorts of personality defects. There's these people are too imperfect to have been perfected by any scientific means.
Not quite Gattaca yet. Thanks so much for writing in, Ken. Next one comes from, again, our tinfoil resident, Carrie M. She says, today I don't just make the tinfoil, I own the company. In episode 5, Orgy, the Golden Women reminded me of, among other things, sexy Star Trek aliens. And she put some photos, again, that we'll post on the Westworld Telegraph on shatontv.com. She says it's not out of the realm of possibility that the next generation Star Trek is an influence for Ford. And then she posts more photos of the sexiest next generation aliens. They're all green or red, and they're doing different maneuvers. And then she says, are you ready for this? The Orion Women, full circle. Actually, it's a terrifyingly good point that all science fiction to date is a viable inspiration for Ford. I don't believe whatsoever that we'll see Star Trek referenced directly in Westworld, but Ford has already admitted cultural references that fans can recognize into the park, and writers confirm the show is firmly set somewhere in the next 50 to 900 years of the 21st century. She again points to some screenshots of this. She says it's just another weird, interesting, eerie thing about the way the show can make one think, seeing what you want to see. Guys, what do we think about the Orion Women from Star Trek Generation being inspiration for the orgy scene that we just saw?
Well, I think nude women is kind of ubiquitous in film, society, TV. You know, it's pretty much out there. Yeah, these photos, they look similar, but the objectification and the use of nude women and in groups like this, I think, is fairly common. I think Star Trek just kind of copied that. And especially in a world that focuses on, the absence of sin and kind of letting loose your libido, I would imagine this would be one of the core pillars that the park was built on.
Next one comes from Steven. It's entitled Duplicate Hosts. While I think the reappearance of Lawrence in Pariah so soon after the Man in Black kills him on screen could be evidence of multiple timelines, there's another option beyond a speedy repair and turnaround. There could also be 2 Lawrence hosts. Producing a duplicate host has got to be cheaper than producing a unique host, so Westworld could reasonably have a Lawrence on one side of the map and another operating on the other side of the map, with the exception that no guest would happen upon both of them in one visit. This also makes sense for important hosts to have redundancy so that the storylines they're required for may continue with one is damaged. That comes from Stephen G.
So I don't know if Stephen was, because I responded to someone on YouTube who had a similar question. And I think there's 2 different parts. Part 1, where they're talking about having, duplicate hosts. I hate talking about Disney, but damn it, we're always back. In Disney, they have multiple Mickeys throughout the park and throughout the different parks. No 2 Mickeys are on stage at any time because there's a chance that some kid could come across Mickey and then see Mickey on the other side of the park. It's just why, a mall doesn't have 2 Santas during Christmas, because it would destroy the entire ambiance. And also the hosts might come across it and say, hey, you look just like my brother who is the same, host. I think it would destroy it. But also, I do like the idea of having redundancy as far as, Teddy. Teddy gets destroyed quite often. If you're expecting to have Teddy down, repaired, and back up within a day, I think that's not realistic. But if you have 15 Teddys ready to go, the scene where Maeve is underground and there's the glass enclosed room where they're hosing off the bodies, to me, those are decommissioned, ruined bodies, things that are beyond repair. And you can only repair the minor injuries. There was no way you were fixing the woodcutter. You'd have to make a new woodcutter. So why wouldn't you just keep spitting them out? So that would make logical sense to me.
And actually, listen, if there's anyone who should be defending this, it's me, because I brought it up on the last podcast that maybe there's duplicate hosts, but we haven't seen evidence of that yet. We haven't seen evidence of duplicate hosts, but we have seen evidence of them uploading duplicate storylines into other hosts. So like when we see the new Abernathy, he's acting as the new Abernathy. It's just a different model. So I think that in the event that they don't want the storyline to be changed, or they're going to take extra time with the Teddy host, maybe they inject the consciousness of Teddy into another model and send him up.
I agree. It would be a really cool reveal if later in the show we you get really attached to like a particular character, and then there's just like this shot where it like pulls back and there's like 50 of them. You're like, whoa, what? It's crazy. Issue I see with that, though, is that when Abernathy is replaced, right? So he's Dolores' dad, and then that unit goes funky, right? And they put him in cold storage. Why wouldn't they just replace him with another Abernathy that looked exactly the same, you know? Like, if you have multiples of the same guy, why don't you just replace him? Why would you pick a guy who looks totally different?
Agreed. Our next telegraph comes from Steven with a PH. It's entitled Simple Question on Contrapasso. Hey guys, I love your show. Definitely the best analysis on Westworld that I've come across. I have one simple question. Why would they allow real nitroglycerin into the park? We already saw Stubbs having to authorize pyrotechnics in the park, so why would they allow a very dangerous explosive that could end up with dead guests and damages to the park, not to mention the danger to the company? Again, I love your show. Keep it up.
This goes back to the multiple timelines theory. I believe this was earlier on. They were not as careful as they are now with the approval for pyrotechnics, and nitroglycerin was allowed in the park. Now, there was, some debate on Twitter and elsewhere that they were like, oh, it's not real nitroglycerin, it would just be like, apple juice or whatever in those bottles. It's not the real thing. I think that this was part of like the fun of the park back then, that it was like, oh yeah, you can steal nitroglycerin and go blow shit up and that's totally okay. Again, we're looking at Pariah. There's all sorts of stuff going on at Pariah. Pariah is not a place I think is allowed to exist anymore in the park, but it's a really cool place that used to. So again, to me, I think it is real nitroglycerin. Why would they allow it in? Shit, they manufactured it.
Yeah, I think this is like those traveling fairs. That shit's not safe, but it's exciting because the Ferris wheel might just completely come apart. A thing I keep going back to is when Maeve digs the bullet out of her. That's a lead bullet. That's a lead jacket from an actual bullet. The munitions we see used throughout the show, besides not having the same impact in the kick, leads me to think back in the day, like you said there, Gene, it was the Wild West. Anything went.
Question about that ammunition, though. Have we seen anyone other than the man in black get shot and not react?
I think we saw Logan.
No, but Logan, when William gets shot, he goes spinning around. Does Logan get shot and he's okay? Logan doesn't get hit, does he?
I thought he did.
No, I don't think he did. The only one we see is William, and he gets knocked down pretty hard. Do we see anybody get shot during Hector's, the safe robbery?
I don't think we see any humans get shot.
Yeah, I think the proof is inconclusive.
So, it could be either way, right? It could be that the ammunition has changed, or it could be that the man in black is just something different.
Or William's a pussy.
I think that's
not a pussy.
I think that's what they were trying to convey. Thanks so much for writing in, Steven, with the PH. Next one comes from Nick from New York. He says, hey guys, Nick from New York here. First off, amazing podcast. In an age of binge watching, I sometimes forget the magic of a standard weekly episodic series. I pity those who are waiting to watch the show in its entirety. They will surely miss out on the collective witch hunt of hosts and humans and the ongoing discussions of the plot of Westworld. Too bad for them. I think that each city on the map is sponsored or owned by different real-life companies. Sweetwater is clearly run by a more organized, clean, and caring foundation or company compared to Pariah, which is just a mess. It's losing money, it's trashed, etc. They don't even remove the bodies after they've been killed. Maybe this has to do with the fact that the town is broke. Maybe the city of Pariah is sponsored and they choose not to spend their money on body removal. I think that Logan's family might own a town or a large chunk of a town, and that they are considering consuming another town, maybe one like Pariah, which is going broke and running itself into the dirt. This is a cool idea because real companies would be able to make money in Westworld. I could own a bar in Pariah and make a killing on liquor sales. If I had a tequila company, I could run that town basically, and I could grow my company from within this fake world. Just an interesting idea as to how business might work in Westworld and in the real world outside the park. Keep up the awesome work. Nick from New York.
My only thought in this is how integrated all of the themes and the narratives have to be in order for the world to function. All of the different towns have to work hand in hand for there be a consistency. You couldn't have Sweetwater start running the Wyatt narrative while Pariah starts running another narrative that conflicts with it. So unless they have some agreement where the companies would work together, which I find hard to believe, I think it has to be one company that does it all.
Pardon me, have any of you heard of federalism? I think this is perfectly reasonable, and this is why we actually have a civil war inside of Westworld is strictly because of this. No, actually, Nick, I wish they had written this into it. This is some really cool conceptualization that would have been really awesome to see, like different cities run that way.
Could you imagine the in-world marketing? You would have like Pariah put up a sign outside Sweetwater being like, Maeve's brothel sucks. Come to Pariah.
Well, I mean, point is though, is getting back to what Big D was saying though, is like I could just imagine, where Sizemore is like, hey, we're gonna have a big shootout in Sweetwater, and Sweetwater Corporation is gonna be like, no, we don't, we don't want. Or on the other hand, it'd be like, oh yeah, that's great for business, bring it on. But who's sponsoring the dinner party, and who's sponsoring, the canyons where you're gonna get scalped? I don't know.
Nestle, the dinner party sponsored by Nestle. No, but that's how it would actually work in the real world if this actually happened. I mean, you look at Walt Disney World. Anytime you go to Walt Disney World, look a little bit closer. They have corporations that sponsor everything. I think ExxonMobil used to sponsor the dinosaur exhibit in Epcot because it was all about harvesting energy. And then as I went older, I went back there. I was like, wait a second. They're trying to commercialize this shit. They're trying to tell me that oil comes from dinosaurs. This is I'm somehow okay with all this drilling now and the Exxon Valdez. No, I'm not okay with that. And then there's restaurants sponsored by like Stouffer's in Walt Disney World. So that would how it would probably work in the real world. I don't think it actually works in this fictional depiction of Westworld. Obviously, society has evolved beyond what we have today. So. Thanks, Nick, for the email. It certainly was an interesting topic to discuss. The next email comes from Crichton. He says, Man in Black identity solved. Hey again, guys, I've attached 2 photos. The knife Man in Black uses that Teddy jams into the table from episode 5 is the first photo I've attached. The second photo is from the upcoming episodes that shows William taking out a knife. Notice any similarities? It's the same knife. I know I should wait to watch the full episode that the preview is from, but I think that Man in Black is William, and this is the proof. Thoughts? So again, he's posted 2 photos that we'll post on the website here. But guys, I got to admit, they look eerily similar. But I mean, you got to imagine they're probably handing out the same knives when you enter the park, right?
No, everything in this park is custom made to the user. They make very clear that that no 2 things are going to be the same. In addition, as a person who carries a knife, I know my knife and I know my friends' knives, and everyone's got a very distinct knife that's theirs. I carry a Heckler and Koch. It's solid black with a black blade, very lightweight. I would know that knife out of a million knives any day. But again, does one person having a knife 30 years after? I mean, that could be explained in a lot of different ways. The Man in Black could have killed William. The Man in Black could be avenging William's death and have taken the knife, as a mark of that. There's a lot of ways to go. More importantly, Teddy's got some really, really pretty hands. That's like a little girl hand that's holding that knife. And he's holding it right by the blade and seemingly doesn't get cut, which is also very strange.
What I like to see here is that I'm not the only fool who's pausing and taking pictures of my TV. I like that. But the hilt on this knife is so distinctive, it has to have been done with a purpose. Is this the Valerian steel dagger that was almost used to kill, Bran Stark?
Spoiler alert.
Oh, Jesus.
Thanks, Christian, for writing in. Next one comes from Henry. It's entitled Single Timeline, for fuck's sake. Howdy, partners. First, let me say that I admire and respect your work, effort, and interest in Westworld. Digging in deep was one of the reasons we did the Cinema Nusha podcast a while back and continue on with the Read My Shorts podcast. We, too, love to peel back the layers and expose the hidden story. He writes a theory. He says Arnold was the original creator. Arnold infused his consciousness into all the hosts in subroutine code, and that the goal of the game is for the host to become sentient, tapping into which they hear as Arnold, in essence their inner voice, what early man mistook for God. Perhaps Ford built himself and was able to transfer his own self into his creation. Perhaps everyone knows that Ford is a host, but also that he is omnipotent, or he lives. But this host act as his avatar, maybe he's infirmed elsewhere throughout the park. In the real world, Hopkins is 78 and likely won't be on the show for 10 years, so making him an unaging, undying robot is really a bad move. But if he chooses a new vessel, a la Doctor Who, another actor can become Ford when Hopkins is ready to leave the show. But that's enough for now, but I will be watching and listening, and I will write again. Thanks for a great podcast. This comes from Henry of the Read My Shorts podcast. So, guys, what do we think of different vessels and this idea that Hopkins probably isn't going to be around long enough, and they'll probably switch consciousnesses into a new host?
I've never bought into the downloaded consciousness theory, and I think I've been pretty vocal about that. But one that I hadn't considered is the avatar theory, the idea that Ford or maybe multiple people operating within the park aren't even in the park, like they could be operating from elsewhere. And I think that's a much more likely scenario. And that would allow them to kind of change out the Ford character if he continues to live on over multiple seasons. That being said, very morbid. I think Hopkins can carry on for a lot longer, and I wish him well and many more years of seeing him on the screen.
Thanks so much for writing in, Henry. Next one comes from one of our favorite listeners, Jez Bell. She writes in, "Hi guys, I'm glad you were honest this week. It's important to have a challenger, if only to make shows better going forward. This week's episode was a bit heavy-handed but I enjoyed it still. It felt a bit mass market compared with the previous episodes. I feel like there is less to discuss as everyone gets caught up and comes to terms with William equals Man in Black. There is certainly a lot more to Lawrence, however, having seen his daughter or wife a few times in the flashbacks, and then there's also this, which she posted a screenshot of Dr. Ford about to pour the whiskey in his conversation that he has with Teddy and Man in Black, and she circles the part where the whiskey's name is Lawrence. She says, "This can't be coincidence. Cheers, Jez."
No, I agree. I feel kind of stupid because when the positioning of the bottle, it was put, front and center. They wanted you to focus on it. And with the scene going so quick, I never got back to look at it because I thought that would be a perfect place to put an Easter egg. Now seeing it, I feel stupid. It's definitely put there for a reason.
Well, I noticed it right off the bat. I mean, I saw it exactly. It was so blatantly placed. It reminded me of that scene in Wayne's World where they're like, holding all the product placement. It just didn't make any sense to me. It says a Sweetwater, Lawrence. I'm like, okay, yeah, I know Sweetwater. I know Lawrence. So what's the point? What was interesting, though, is that, Dr. Ford right after that says, though, that he says that, he doesn't like that he never drinks alone. And I thought about that, and I was like, that I also thought had some significance because you notice that whenever he's having a drink, he's always having a drink. There's a conversation with another person going on, and there's always, shots of whiskey involved. And I'm really curious as to, as even as old Bill calls it, he calls it the old coffin varnish, but that there seems to be something going on with the booze on the show too that I'm curious about. And one of my friends pointed out on Facebook, they were like, why do they even bother giving booze to hosts? It seems like a real waste. And I was like, well, I think because they're biological, A, and also because B, like it's a small investment to make to, if you're drinking with a host and you drink it and it's not booze, you'd be like, this is a terrible experience.
Yeah, again, if you had them not eat or drink or do things that normal humans do, you would destroy the entire flow of the park. That's part of everyday life. We see them out tending the herds. You need all that. But besides drinking for him is tied to reminiscing. He likes to drink with, pieces of his past. And I think in this, he uses it for the Man in Black to discuss the past and remember it.
What if Lawrence is the corporate sponsor for that whiskey, and then as part of his corporate sponsorship deal, he gets a host in the same likeness also inserted into the park? No? Okay, good. I'm glad you guys aren't coming with me on that one. Our next telegraph comes from Paul. He says, "Good day, mate. This is Paul from Australia here. I binged your podcast, and I'm enjoying it almost as much as Westworld itself. The show has taken me back to the meatiest bits of Dollhouse and the textual analysis of Lost. I thought I'd share some of my theories with you and see what you think. Number one, I'm all aboard the two time periods train a past with William and Logan, and a future with the Man in Black. Number 2, I think that Jeffrey Wright is playing Arnold in the past and Bernard, aka an unwitting android duplicate of Arnold, in the future. Many of the conversations with Dolores, particularly the ones where she's clothed, are Arnold teaching her to be sentient. He's not the Adam of Westworld's creation myth. He's the Lucifer, God's right-hand man who caused their creations to grow beyond God's vision. And number 3, I think the past will culminate with the incident. It will be the result of Dolores' growing sentience, and whatever happens will change William so thoroughly that it becomes the Man in Black. As possibly the only survivor, William gets comped VIP tickets for life. I also think Arnold will die, and that also Logan will die so that William takes over the company. Love the podcast. Looking forward to the next episode. Cheers, Paul.
Well, I like that. It gives an alternate explanation to the difference in Bernard's clothes. That it's not him remoting in, but it's actually a different time. And I also like the idea that we are obviously, the show wants us to pull for Dolores. They want us to help her and hope that she gets free and gets, this awakening. I think it would be fantastic if that awakening, is a result of a lot of people dying and causes the park to go into chaos. And instead of that awakening being beautiful, it turns into a very destructive force, which a lot of times in history it is. They say what change is very violent. And I think that would be poetic if Dolores' change it resulted in a lot of deaths.
Great. Thanks so much for writing in. Next one comes from Mark. It's entitled, I Want to Believe. Hi, guys. Love the show. I'm supposed to be asleep already, but I've just got to the point in this week's podcast where you are talking about the multiple timelines. For me, the jury is still out, and I'm still leaning more on the side of there not being multiple timelines. However, after listening to you guys, you have nearly converted me. I have one last piece of evidence to support my theory that there is only one timeline. When Dolores is in the barn, when she has the flashbacks, does she not have a vision of the Man in Black? If so, this is the same Dolores who is now with Will and Logan. So surely, if Will and Logan are supposedly 30 years ago, she could not have flashed back to the Man in Black. Thoughts, regards, Mark from the UK.
We've covered this one before, Mark, but to kind of recap on it, I'm of the belief that if I don't see a camera follow a character from one scene to the next, I don't believe that those two scenes are connected. And in fact, even if I do, Dick has pointed out that this is being told through Dolores' eyes, and these are some screwed up eyes. So like time frames, faces, chronology, none of it really makes sense. I think her head is a scramble right now. And so I don't know if she's a reliable benchmark for things. I would much rather depend on things like the Man in Black or like Stubbs to go, okay, maybe we've got some benchmarks here. With Dolores, it's so unclear. That being said, it is something that I observed too. How could she see an older Man in Black in the past? She would have no memory of that.
Great, thanks so much for writing. Next one comes from Nafal. He writes, yet another William is not the Man in Black. Hi, love the podcast and the dynamic between you guys. You make me smile. Just want to give you my 2 cents as well. I think that the maze was something genuine and real, where hosts started gaining self-awareness and questioning their existence. By starting to remember bits and pieces and putting it together little by little, they must have realized their enslavement. And the maze is somehow a way to discover the full extent of the rabbit hole. But when Ford and the humans found out and quelled the rebellion, i.e. the incident, they have worked the maze in the narrative and created Orgy City, Pariah, as a pressure release valve where hosts can embark on a quest to free themselves, only to realize that at the end, it's just another mechanism of control, yet another loop. So what we are watching now is the first rebellion, the Man in Black timeline, and just another loop playing out, the William timeline. Thanks, so guys, for taking the time reading my email. It's nice to know that I'm not the only one with far out thoughts. Nafal.
Yeah, what I like to go back to is we talked before about what's scary isn't artificial intelligence that can pass the Turing test, but the ones that intentionally fail it. I like the idea that the maze is a trap. If you have hosts that are actually becoming aware and the park can't tell, by presenting the maze as a way for the host to escape, you're setting a perfect trap, a final barrier of protection that would lure out hosts that are actually becoming aware, and you have no way of knowing. So to me, it's a perfect moat, a way to protect the park.
I agree. The next one comes from Mike, he says, hey, love the podcast. Never agreed with the multiple timeline theories, and episode 5 blows it out of the water. When the Man in Black is talking to Teddy about how the hosts used to be machines instead of flesh and bone, under the 2 timelines, William is Man in Black theory, the hosts encountered in William's timeline should be more mechanical machines. Instead, they seem the same. Guys, your thoughts?
I thought of this today because I'd had somebody say a very similar thing on YouTube. I could totally picture, yes, if the William in the park right now, but Logan has been there before. Logan's an expert. Logan's family is extremely wealthy. Couldn't you picture Logan visiting the park with his parents as a child? And I could picture a little sadistic Logan cutting open one of the original mechanical hosts. Yes, the hosts, when we see Logan now as an adult in his late 20s, 30s, they're all flesh and bone and biological. But a young, twisted little Logan, sure, he'd want to pull a Jeffrey Dahmer and open one of them up.
I think also an important one to note is that the Man in Black is a very different viewpoint of the host than most guests in the park. Most guests are not cutting them open and seeing what's inside, you know? You're getting an exterior view. So, yeah, they might bleed. They might, you could pump them full of nitro, all that stuff. But if you were to get down into the guts of the thing, the brain, the control unit, the real core parts of it, that's what he was talking about as far as being different. Not that they had like bizarre servos, you know, in their fingers and stuff like that. So I think that it's, again, that being said, I don't want to cling so strongly to my multiple timelines theory that I'm blind to this other stuff. These are all really good points. And I wouldn't be surprised if it either wasn't a separation of multiple years, or maybe that, you know, we're talking about a completely different explanation that we haven't even considered yet.
Thanks so much for writing in. Next one comes from Heather. She writes, early in Contrapasso, as Dolores and Ford are finishing their conversation, she asks, are we very old friends? As Ford answers, one tear rolls from his eyes. It's most beautifully acted, and so Ford apparently has regrets and sadness. I suspect his sins are grievous, and clearly he is self-aware, as the best villains are. I tracked it to the 23rd minute, and he also is seen to quickly wipe it away in a shot taken over his shoulder. Very subtle, but isn't that what we enjoy and call good TV? And oh, hell yes, Ford is a villain. Arrogant, autocratic, cruel. The only reason to take a scalpel to the inappropriately dressed host's face was to traumatize the technician he was reprimanding. Undoubtedly, lies will be revealed, and you know in your heart that Ford betrayed Arnold, and Arnold is hanging around in Dolores' head orchestrating revenge. Keep thinking, and we need pictures of you 3 in tin hat attire. Heather.
I disagree again on the Ford. Ford being a villain is too simple. The black hat, white hat thing is a ruse, right? Nobody is a black hat or a white hat. Ford is arrogant, yes. Autocratic, yes. Cruel, yes. But the reason why he takes a scalpel to the host's face is to draw a complete... I mean, he's literally drawing a line between what is human and what is not, because he is trying to prevent, and I think we'll see that, if there is an uprising again, and perhaps he's witnessed one before, or witnessed what can happen when that line is crossed, you know, again, let's look at it from a different angle. If he was close with Arnold and Arnold was killed, or if he is Arnold and Arnold was killed, he is trying to protect all sorts of people in these scenarios. One, he's trying to protect the park from utter destruction, trying to protect guests from being massacred. He's also trying to protect the hosts themselves from what would happen. If you can imagine, let's say Dolores, she's been being used at least 30 years, being raped daily, being slaughtered, having the ones she loves killed over and over and over again. And then you regain consciousness and you connect your conscious, your subconscious, get access to all those old memories and have to process that. He's protecting her from herself and what she would have to experience in that. So in a sense, I don't see, you know, Ford is more a parent than a villain. That's like calling your mom or dad, you know, a villain for teaching you lessons that sometimes might scare you or might make you sad.
But I think it's great. He's a complex character. He's not black and white, like Gene said. He is, yes, controlling and domineering, but at the same point, he's showing compassion for the hosts, that he thinks it's cruel to have them experience and be aware. He's showing both sides of it, and I love the tear. He's a man of action, and he'll do what's necessary, but that doesn't mean he won't regret it. So I think in that conversation, he's reminded of the past with Arnold, and feeling guilty for whatever's happened, but also realizing it had to be done.
Thanks so much for writing in. Next email comes from Kevin. He writes, "Hey dudes, why is everyone so convinced William is the Man in Black when there's already a Man in Black under our nose? I believe in the dual timelines. I believe that the William Logan timeline is leading up to a catastrophic event of 30 years ago, but to me it makes more sense that Logan is the Man in Black. There is no transformation required, merely the passing of time. Logan behaves much like Man in Black already. He's an heir to a family fortune, and he seems to already have been at the park many times. The stuff he's going through with William provides ample explanation as to why Man in Black would know to look for the maze to guide his way. I know it's slightly less intriguing, but often the twist is that the obvious perpetrator was hiding in plain sight, a la Kaiser Soze." That comes from Kevin.
Yeah, I think we see that Logan is already more apt to want to take the side missions. The excitement that he finds when he realizes they have El Lazo, it would make sense that his character, the type of person he is, would want to keep escalating and going each level of the park, trying to experience it all. I still believe that if the Man in Black is a character, it has to be someone that we don't think, and William and Logan are too obvious. So who knows? I talk myself into different directions every day.
Thanks, Kevin, for writing in. Next one comes from Pete. Pete writes, "Hey guys, love the podcast. Thought I would email in with my thoughts." And this goes in kind of bullet by bullet, but it's all about the train scene at the end. He said the last shot of Dolores is on the train, except she is alone with no William or Lawrence, who were a moment before sitting drinking behind her. At the start of the show, Dolores is in her own amid the graves. She closes her eyes and imagines herself in the church and hears a voice. When she opens her eyes, William, Logan, and Slim are now there. Dolores can shoot a gun in the timeline with William, but she cannot in the timeline with where Wyatt exists. There's never any mention of the war in the Man in Black's timeline, and there's never any mention of Wyatt in Logan and William's timeline. I believe this means that Dolores is reliving the journey that she took 30 years ago with William and Logan, except this time she is alone and we are seeing parts of both journeys. This also explains how she can be pulled out of the park by Bernard and Dr. Ford without William or Logan noticing. Guys, what do we think about this?
I think that's plausible. It would be difficult to have all these multiple big narratives running simultaneously. So it would make sense that the war would exist in one when there's no reference of it in the other, that the Wyatt storyline could be, in the Man in Black's portion, but not in the past. Or it could just be that the park is so large that maybe you wouldn't hear of the Wyatt narrative until you went out a little bit further. We've seen that Sweetwater is a little more PG and corporate run and market driven. Maybe they saved the twisted, perverted Wyatt storyline for those who venture further out.
Thanks so much for writing in. Next one comes from Jill A. It's a long one, so you're going to have to read most of this on our website, shatontv.com, underneath Westworld Telegraph. But she writes, "Hey again, last week I wrote to you about what it means to be real in Westworld, as well as my thoughts on Ford being a god. Thanks for reading it on the show. I almost choked when I heard you start reading my words. While talking with a coworker about something other than a dystopian science fiction, I was inadvertently reminded of a philosophical concept that I'd read in school several years ago. There was a specific quote on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't remember exactly how it went, nor could I remember who said it. All I knew for a moment is that it was eerily similar to the themes in Westworld. I instantly began Googling every philosopher name I could remember, and after spending a couple of hours digging my way through a virtual rabbit hole, I emerged with an entirely new interpretation of this story. The quote is, "What if someday or night a demon were to steal after you in your loneliest and say to you, 'This life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times before. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or have you once experienced such a tremendous moment that you would have answered him, 'You are a god, and never have I ever heard anything more divine?'" That comes from, and I'm going to butcher the last name. Gene, how do I say this? It's Friedrich. It's Nietzsche, right?
Yes.
All right. So Nietzsche, of course. How have I not seen this before? This is not a story about religion, but a story about a world without it. This is a world in which God is dead and morality doesn't yet exist. It's a world where people don't need to seek a higher power because they don't know how to question their origin, nor do they wonder about life after death. Until now, that is. So, and she goes into very deep philosophical meanings and breaks it down. So I highly recommend reading this. But Gene, what do you think about Friedrich Nietzsche's idea of of existing in a world without God and comparison to Westworld?
Well, I mean, as a staunch atheist, I mean, I'm a big fan of Nietzsche, and I think it's a connection that I hadn't made either. I hadn't even thought about it, Jill, until you brought it up. Really want to read through this whole thing and get back to you on the blog for sure, because I would love to pour into this. And I have a gaggle of my friends in Chicago who are scholars of Nietzsche, so at the PhD level. So it'd be actually really good to kind of go over that with them. But yeah, the idea that this place could be a heaven or a hell depending on what it is that you cling to. For instance, if you are a Teddy or a Dolores, and you asked yourself, if you asked Teddy, if he had to die and suffer every day, but he would see Dolores every day, he actually has come out and said it, even I think in episode 2 or 3. Likewise with Abernathy. Abernathy, I think, is the finest example of this. Actually, the original Abernathy, he has 3 directives, right? He has protect his homestead, protect the cattle, and protect Dolores, right? That's like what he's built to do. And he when he finds that photo and he says, that he asked a question that he wasn't supposed to, ask, and then he found the answer. It throws him out of that loop, but still, even after that, his connection to her is so tight that they run him through different builds. They run him through every diagnostic possible. Eventually, have to put him away because that reality is displayed to him that he's going to relive this over and over and over again, and he chooses to. He accepts it, but at the same time, it enrages him. So he's kind of taking both sides of that.
Yeah, I'm not the most philosophical usually, but my take on this is it's not an indictment of the host, but more of the text and man behind the park. It's not an absence of God for the host, but it's the technicians and man playing God. The things we're doing with science and cloning and creation of life, we're doing without a question of what are the ramifications. And as far as the loops, man has a really bad habit of repeating its own mistakes and reliving them. The park is a perfect example. They have an accident, something that happens 30 years in the past. Do they change anything? No, they continue doing it. You're bound to relive and to suffer your mistakes over and over again. And that's exactly what we see going on in the park.
I think, Gene, if this were somehow made into a blog post, this is some great information there. And again, we highly recommend you go and taking this look. Jill, great work here.
Very thorough.
Very thorough.
Very thorough. It's like 8 pages.
Yeah. Our next telegraph comes from Chris from Houston. He says, "Great cast, guys. I just wanted to point out what I perceived as a major data point in the 5th episode. We see that Lawrence has knowledge of the maze symbol on the coffins when he is with William and Dolores. Now think back to when the Man in Black first saves Lawrence from being hanged. The first thing Man in Black does is show him Kissy's scalp with that same symbol. Lawrence apparently doesn't recognize that symbol at that point. This appears to be a major discrepancy. Make of it what you will. Keep up the great cast." Chris, what do we think of that?
No, Lawrence always was playing dumb. He played dumb all up until the point where he shoots his wife. And then he comes clean. He was acting like he had no knowledge of it, where the whole time he did. It took shooting the wife and threatening to kill the daughter before he goes, "Yep, it's not for you," the whole line. So I think it was just him acting and keeping the secret.
All right, next telegraph comes from Susie. She writes, "Ford is Frankenstein's monster. Hey guys, love the podcast. Absolute favorite thing to break up my loop of a work commute. Theory. What if Ford was Arnold's first creation? A robot who accessed consciousness, then turned on his creator after he started to show more interest in other hosts, and now has assumed the role of creator in Westworld, and thereby preventing all other hosts to get to that point of consciousness and decommissions anyone that does. This explains Ford's omnipotent power to control all the hosts at literally a flick of his wrist. Let me know what you think. After listening to 4 different Westworld podcasts, yours is by far the best and deepest I've found. Again, that's Susie from Long Island.
Hey, Susie, I'm a Long Island boy, born in Long Island Jewish Hospital, grew up in Manhasset, grew up in Queens. So let's preface that by saying we're coming from a similar viewpoint, but I'm going to have to disagree on a couple things. One is, why would any of these things be built without an off switch, right? Like, any machine that you build, the first thing you're going to do is have an off. And I can't imagine why Delos wouldn't shut him down, other than the fact that they might need him, right? That he's the only thing that keeps things ticking. This is, Ford. Assuming that's the case, assuming they need him, then in that case, yeah, I could see where there's this additional dimension to the whole story, which is his jealousy, right? That he wants to be in complete control, can't have anyone be above him. But to the point of killing Arnold, I think if he did it, it was, again, I can only see it happening in an accidental scenario. I don't see the malice there. I haven't detected it in anything that's happened so far.
Well, what do they say? That absolute power corrupts absolutely?
Sure.
Generally, when people gain wealth or gain power, they will do anything to hold on to it, and very few of them use that wealth and power to pick each other up. We've seen the Man in Black as a foundation that helps, obviously, in the real world, but in a lot of cases, that's not what happens. So I could see one host becoming aware, gaining a sense of power, and realizing if everyone became free, he would lose what made him special and lose his power. Plausible.
Thanks so much for writing in. The next email comes from Kat T. It's entitled A Man in Black Timeline. She says, thanks for reading my email on last week's podcast. Some of what you didn't end up reading, though, feels even more important now after this week's episode. So if I may, I'd like to expand on it. And it's a little tough to read exactly what she wrote, but essentially what she did is she put out an entire timeline for proof point of kind of what's going on. And we also tweeted a photo of this as well. So you can find this on shatontv.com. But she also put a couple questions that I want to read off to you guys. She says, why is Dolores suddenly by herself on the train at the end of the scene? So someone else has already asked that. And why does William say time to stop pretending? What does he mean by that? Also, I'm 100% on board with all the allegory from the Bible. Ford is God, Arnold is Satan, consciousness equals forbidden fruit, Job is Dolores or Teddy, and pariah equals Sodom. That's again from Kat T from San Francisco. So one thing we didn't address, guys, is the Dolores by herself on the end of the scene when they're on the train. Is that evidence that she's just on a loop and kind of remembering being there with William and Lawrence?
I thought Lawrence invited William to go for a drink. Did I?
So they went to a different.
Is that right?
Maybe.
Wait, hold on.
Wait, in the train scene?
Yeah, in the train scene.
In the train scene, it's they're up in front, and it's just shot different. Lawrence and William are drinking in the front of the car.
That's what I thought.
She's standing in the back of the car with the caskets.
So you're saying that the camera angle...
The camera angle's different, yeah. One of them is shooting from Dolores' perspective, where you can see Lawrence and William kind of having a drink in the front of the car. Then it switches to their position, and it shoots the back, so you can see the caskets with the brand of the maze on it.
I'm going to have to look at some screenshots of this, because this is a popular theory right now, and I thought that the camera angle was the same, but we're going to have to get back to you on this one. And then why does William say time to stop pretending? What does he mean by that, guys?
Logan mentions how kind of powerless and how meaningless and insignificant William is, not only to his family, but to the company. Wouldn't it be great if Logan believes he's the smart one in the family, but somehow William has been sent as the representative because he's not as helpless as we're led to believe by Logan? It would be great if this entire time he's been playing the helpless kind of white hat, where the entire time he was the corporate representative there to get an honest assessment. I think Logan would be a bit pissed if he found out that the family, sent him as a decoy and that William was the one who's actually there working for the father. It's a bit of a stretch, but it's what I got.
Thanks so much for writing in, Kat. Next one comes from. Go ahead.
They're not in that car at all at that last scene. The camera actually pans from both angles, and you can see where they were sitting, and they're just not there.
Okay, so what does that mean, guys?
Well, I think that idea that she's reliving stuff.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know what it means. I mean, I hate to fucking guess when I don't have a clue. It's just they're just not there. I assume that she was in the back by the coffin and they were up front. But when you look at it, it shoots her from one side and then another side, and there's nobody there. And it's pretty like they hold that shot for a while, and you see like the kind of the car rocking and stuff, and she's just standing there next to the casket, kind of looking off in a hero's pose, and it's not. And she says, "I'm coming."
Yeah, well, it makes sense if you're trying to make her follow a path that she has previously gone down, giving her those bits and those memories would help tie it in and have her. That's how she could have knowledge of the train schedule. She knows that every night at this time the train leaves, and I remember running to it. So it would make sense that these memories are her roadmap to relive and go down the path to find the ultimate destination.
And it's interesting that she doesn't say we're coming; it's I'm coming. She knows where she's going, and she's doing it alone.
It's interesting. Good catch, Kat. The next one comes from Jimmy. Jimmy lives in Hong Kong. He writes in, I started listening last week and really love your podcast. They're in-depth and cover so many interesting topics. I want to chime in. I have a point I want to make. Dolores is searching for the maze with William. William saw the maze symbol on the coffin on the train. My guess is that William will encounter the maze symbol many more times as the show progresses. Dolores may even tell him about the maze or reach the maze with William. In any case, it seems doubtful to me that if William is Man in Black, that the Man in Black would need to scalp a host to discover the maze symbol. William should be able to draw the symbol from memory if he figures out that the symbol is important. It certainly wouldn't take him 30 years to reach the point Man in Black is at right now. This would point to Logan as more likely the candidate to be Man in Black. This is from, again, Jimmy in Hong Kong.
One of the things that we discussed on a previous podcast, Jimmy, is that the symbol seems to have been, if you subscribe to the multiple time frames, the symbol was a lot more prevalent back in the day. It was all over the place, and then now it's hidden, almost like there was an open rebellion, and now there's a resurgence, and that resurgence is much more covert, right? And so it's not that the Man in Black doesn't recognize the maze. I think he recognizes it immediately when he sees it. He's trying to find, the maze is guiding him along, right? So he's looking for it high and low, and finally discovers that the place where it's hidden, he's trying to find the host that's carrying it, right? And then he finds Kissy's scalp, and that kind of sets him off on the path. So to me, it's not a question of him needing to scalp a host to discover it, but rather that he's been looking for it, and perhaps not for 30 years consistently. Like maybe he's been gone for a long time, like I said, and he's back for a reason.
Thanks so much for writing in. Next one comes from Federico. He says, hey guys, I really enjoy your podcast. Listen every week. Thanks for your time and efforts. This is the first time I've ever written into a podcast. I live in Chamois, France, but grew up in the United States and Italy. I've been thinking since learning that the park costs $40,000 per day that we could roughly estimate when Westworld takes place by using a simple inflation calculator. I don't think this in any way changes the plot, but I thought it could add an interesting data point to the discussion. In order to estimate the value of $40,000 in the future, we need a starting point. The show suggests that Westworld is an amusement park for the ultra-rich. This doesn't feel like an experience that the upper middle class gets to enjoy. So if we look at the current prices for the best hotels in the world that cater to the same clientele as Westworld, we can find the price for roughly the equivalent value proposition today. In 2016, the finest royal/presidential suites in hotels like the Principe de Saova in Milan or the Burj Al Arab in Dubai cost around $12,000 per night. An internet search finds at least 25 hotels around the world with rooms in this price range. If we take this as an approximate starting point for an equivalent experience, then Westworld takes place approximately 30 years in the future, assuming that inflation trends of the last 30 years continue in the future. However, if we lower the price of entry to $5,000 in today's money, then the park exists 50 years in the future. Again, this doesn't change much, but it would suggest that the show does not take place hundreds of years in the future. Keep up the good work. With kind regards, Federico.
Well, that's impressive, Federico. That's definitely got a different way to you've carbon dated it with dollars, and I love that. I agree. It seems like in interviews with Nolan and other people involved with the storytelling process of Westworld, it's not that far into the future, and also the technology kind of holds as well too. I really don't think we're that far off from robots that are virtually indistinguishable from humans. I don't think it's going to be in my lifetime, but I think definitely in the next 100 to 200 years, that's absolutely okay. I think if you went any further out, if you went 400 to 500 years into the future, nothing's even going to look remotely the same. So I completely agree. There wouldn't even be the need for a physical experience at that point. You could just implant one into your head.
But seriously, good research. I like it. The quality of our emails just always blows me away.
They're amazing. Next telegraph comes from Tom. He says, "Hey man, really enjoying the podcast so far. You guys are really dedicated to this and it's boosting my enjoyment tenfold. So thanks for that. I have a small suggestion, and I don't want to step on your toes at all, but you guys seem to enjoy this open dialogue between you and the fans. My suggestion is having a section at the end of the podcast where you discuss the trailer for next week's show. There's been a couple of times when you or your compadres have mentioned things that happen in trailers, like last week when somebody mentioned seeing Teddy slung over the back of the Man in Black's horse. I'm the kind of guy who likes to go into every episode blind, so I avoid trailers as they can be unwitting spoilers. So I think having a point at the end of the cast, post-episode discussion where people like me could stop listening, and the idea who enjoy trailers could just carry on listening would be a solid addition to the podcast. Just an idea. Keep up the good work, and thanks for the hard work, Tom."
I apologize. I completely wasn't even doing that, realizing it. But yes, that's not what I want to do. I will try to stop doing that in future episodes. And usually there's not enough there to really... to delve into, because the instant cast, we want to get it in and out. So I think we'll try to hold off on that until maybe the main cast, and then we could take a couple minutes at the end. But sorry about that if we spoiled anything.
Yeah, I would agree and add to that the thing with trailers that I never really think about is the fact that they're so misleading so often that things are strung together and in fact don't even kick in for another 3 or 4 episodes, and it's not what you think it is. It's a dream sequence or like some sort of a flashback. You never know. In any event, though, I don't even really watch the trailer for the next episode for the same reasons, because I just feel like they add more confusion than anything. But if we do discuss them, I think we can commit to discussing them at the end, if at all.
Our next email comes from George. He writes, "Dr. Ford is not a host. He's very human, and that's his problem. He is full of hubris, omniscient power, and yes, a new purpose to finally find Arnold, thus the new narrative. I'll give you the short points, but there is so much. Number 1, Dolores is in the farmer girl loop, so Dr. Ford can keep an eye on her. She has Arnold deep inside. Ford can't access that build, so of all the characters, it appears she is always in a deeper dream than the others. He is trying to flush out Arnold by keeping Dolores in the rape loop to antagonize a response from Arnold about his most favorite. He knows her prior purpose was to destroy the park. He instills the reveries to provoke Arnold out of hiding. He is trying everything to find Arnold. The new narrative giving Teddy a bigger role, he is trying to play on Arnold's emotionalism. He can sense something is up. Arnold is the other company involved in the corporate espionage. Arnold is not dead. He wants his park back. He has activated the self-aware program in the hosts in order to create the end of Ford Delos, something he could not accomplish 30 years ago. Ford is not the villain per se, though. He just has to deal with Arnold making a comeback. And the Man in Black is just a feint, a distraction, or a gamer who needs the ultimate end for the game to have purpose. He is the greyhound chasing the felt. The maze is empty for a non-host. The little girl says so. It has always been Ford versus Arnold. Arnold finally finding the time to act. It is the long game. The time has come because the park is going to shit by his hand. He believes Ford is vulnerable. He's lost a step. The show is nothing more than corporate mergers and acquisitions, a hostile takeover using robots to gain the upper hand, and a blood feud between two great men. I mean, that's season 1. The other seasons will deal with the ramification of making the host self-aware.
Well, I mentioned this last week. I thought I said that it would be funny if the Man in Black was just the ultimate weekend warrior. He was out there just, playing the game, looking for the mystery. He's a man who obviously wants for nothing. So possibly this inevitable hidden hunt for the maze would give him, some drive and something to find. I do like the idea, though, of Ford. He's obviously manipulating Bernard. He's not oblivious to what Bernard is doing. He might not know the long end game of what the maze is and what's going on, but he's definitely helping grease the wheels of whatever Arnold/Bernard's plan is.
Our next telegraph comes from Adam. He says, "Hey guys, love the podcast. This show gives me the same feeling as I had watching Lost. Yes, some questions didn't have answers that I loved, and some answers were never given at all. But what gave me joy was the experience. Viewing plus conversation plus theorizing equals enjoyment and immersion. Something lost on most binge watching nowadays. In the William and Logan timeline, I think Arnold could still be alive and communicating to Dolores. Maybe we see him at the front. This could explain why the symbol is more prevalent in the park. That timeline is leading up to the incident, and at this point, the symbol didn't have meaning. I'll go out on a limb and say Dolores and William do not reach the maze or start the revolution. Flash forward to the present timeline with the Man in Black, who is still looking for the maze, having missed out on that great quest line so many years ago, has to search for the maze symbol and find a trail to it once again. Thanks for a great show." So he's saying essentially Arnold is existing in the William and Logan timeline, but they actually never finalize it, and that's why he's back. Guys, your thoughts on this?
I'd never really thought about Arnold still being alive. I just kind of assumed that he was already dead by the time that the Logan and William timeline was happening. But yeah, I mean, actually, that does make sense. I don't recall if Logan mentions him by name or not, but I don't think anybody ever says that he's dead in that other timeline.
All right, next email comes from Joanna R. It's a long one, so she put too long, didn't read. Dolores has not been having interviews with Bernard, but with Arnold. They have been occurring 30 years before the Man in Black timeline and the Violent Delights code virus. The maze was the self-discovery quest Arnold put her on her own. 30 years later, Man in Black is on the same quest to figure out what went wrong. So the entire email that she puts, again, we'll post on shatontv.com. She goes into great detail. She also puts at the end, "I also notice a lot of your listeners are female, and perhaps you would benefit from a female perspective. No worries. Until later, Joanna."
Of course, most of our detailed writers are women. We've acknowledged that. I think that our female listeners are a lot more detail-oriented sometimes and do tons of research. So we definitely appreciate our female audience. My question is Joanne asking for a fourth seat?
I think Joanna's asking to be on the show, guys.
Or maybe she's not listening because we got tons of women, tons of smart women who are writing in.
No. She wants a female host on the show.
Oh, well, maybe we'll have to have auditions. I know who Roger would like to pick.
I want Georgia.
Oh, there it is.
Not
Georgia, lock your doors. Lock your windows.
Yeah, no, I think there's truth to this, Joanna. I do believe that Dolores has been having interviews with Arnold. Not sure of the timeline though, or the quest. I still believe that we're seeing a just one linear timeline. Anyway, you can find all the details that she wrote there on shatontv.com. Next one comes from Christopher. He says, "Great job, guys. I love having the 3 podcasts per week. Quick thoughts on some subjects that you covered in the big cast after episode 5, specifically about Lawrence. In the scenes with Man in Black, Lawrence is a famous outlaw. He is about to be hanged before the Man in Black rescues him and takes him to Las Mudas to get more information on the maze. Then, in episode 4, Man in Black and Lawrence go to the jail to break Hector out as part of the deal with Armistice. When they are brought there, Lawrence is again recognized as a famous outlaw and is sent to the firing squad. Is it possible the name Lawrence is just an alias or another identity El Lazo is using in Sweetwater and other parts of the park to try and conceal that he is really El Lazo from Pariah.
Yeah, doesn't he reveal that? Doesn't he tell, was it William or Logan, that his real name is Lawrence?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
Lawrence is El Lazo's real name. It is the same character, at least, the notorious outlaw.
Yeah, I believe that all the other people just keep calling him Lawrence because they know he's El Lazo. They know he's the outlaw. They just don't explicitly say it.
Yeah, and it's also the Man in Black is showing his personal knowledge and his relationship with him, that he doesn't even call him by what everybody does, that he's on a personal level with him.
Our next one comes from Sam. And again, we have very smart listeners because it comes from a Stanford email address. He says, I just want to say first how much I've enjoyed your podcast after my brother Ben, who you read a theory from once, introduced me to it. I have a theory about Lawrence that I'm not entirely certain that I believe. I think that Lawrence's plot line with William, Logan, and Dolores takes place entirely after Man in Black drains his blood and is going to lead him up and getting hung again. Maybe they cleaned him up fast enough from getting his blood drained that he can be put back on his loop. William and Logan are told they can't meet up with Lawrence right away and have to wait a day. During that day, Lawrence was cleaned up and put back at the beginning of his loop in Pariah. The only thing I can't grapple with is why Man in Black has to scalp Kissy rather than just looking around for Pariah on the map for the maze on a tarot card. It seems that that would be much easier to carry a card to show around than a scalp. But that's all for now. Thanks, Sam.
I think it's a great observation, Sam. I'm a pretty firm believer in the multiple timelines, but this one is actually really interesting because we kind of kept saying, well, how is it that he got back over there? Now we know he's an outlaw universally. Everybody knows that. Who knows how often he goes back to his village? So as far as going back to Las Mudas, he could go back there once a year. I mean, who knows, right? So that doesn't mean anything. He could live in Pariah most of the time. And the only time we see him outside of there is when he's about to be hanged, right? So maybe he got caught in connection with something. The fact that they had to wait a day to see him makes perfect sense, actually, because why else would they make him wait a day? These are guests, right? Why would you make them wait a day to see somebody?
Yeah, I'm not going to say I told you so, guys, but I believe I brought this up on the big cast.
We tune you out a lot of times.
I know you do. All right. Thanks, Sam, for writing it. It's glad to know that the smart people from Stanford are aligning themselves with Roger. So thank you, Team Roger. Our next one's kind of a fun email. It's one of those F, Marry, Kill emails. It comes from RJ. He says, okay, in the interest of payback, through a stunt Big D made us go through over on our show, Critically Dead, which is a podcast that covers The Walking Dead, it is now your guys' turn to play the lovable game of Fuck, Marry, Kill. Your choices are, and he gave us a guy's version and a woman's version. So I'll throw this out to you. Which one do you want to do first, guys or girls?
Oh, guys, easily.
All right.
Hell yeah.
All right. So the choices are F, Marry, Kill, Rebus, Felix, Sizemore. Big D, you go first.
I think it's easy. I think you have to kill Rebus. He's kind of nasty, smelly, and we see what he does to Dolores in the barn. I don't want any part of that. I would have to bang Sizemore because I think he'd be creative. He might do some role play. It would never get boring. But I got to marry Felix. He's an animal lover. He's gentle and he's sensitive. So that's somebody I'd want to spend my time with.
Gene, you go next.
You still doing guys?
Yeah, still on guys.
Oh, yeah, I'm 100% in line with Big D. Rebus is reprehensible. I've seen what he looks like with cream on his face, and I do not like it. So he dies. Sizemore is just so tiny and tight. I would just and he's got an accent. I mean, that's the fuck for sure. And yeah, you marry Felix. Felix just got a heart of gold. And also, I'm a big pet lover, so if he can reanimate my animals, that'd be really great. Yeah,
so I'm going to go a little bit different here, guys. I'm going to kill Felix because he's kind of a pussy, right? You know what I mean? He's just kind of down there. He's just kind of a weakling. I'm going to kill you right away. I'm going to fuck Rebus because he's got that handlebar mustache and something I can hold on to. And then I'm going to marry Sizemore because it seems like he's very ambitious. I'm going to marry Sizemore, and we're going to
you're gonna hold on to his handlebar mustache.
That's what I'm going to do.
How does that work?
I don't know. But
So glad I shaved.
that's our F, Marry, Kill for the guys. For the girls, F, Marry, Kill Teresa Cullen, Armistice, or Elsie. Gene, you go first on this one.
I've got to kill Teresa right off the bat. I've never liked her character. The accent bugs me because it doesn't. I have no explanation for it, and with a critical mind, it bothers me. Now, I don't mind a person with an accent. Don't get me wrong here, or an actress with an accent, but rather that its placement in the story confounds me, and so I'm always puzzling over it. Also, her outfits are just atrocious and worthy of execution. I'd have to fuck Elsie. Elsie has already shown she's a freak by go ahead and doing the kissing scene with not because Clementine's a woman, but because Clementine is an inoperative bot that she kisses. And of course, then I'd have to marry Armistice. Armistice has this incredible mix of violence and vulnerability, and I'm just a sucker for a tough lady, and so she's a dream woman to me. So that'd be my choice.
I'm going to go a little different. I'll agree. You got to kill Teresa because I can't deal with a smoker. That's a deal breaker for me, unfortunately. Plus, she's got a bit of an attitude. I would have to bang Armistice because she just seems wild. It would be fun, but she's damaged, and over long periods of time, I think that would be difficult to deal with. Whereas Elsie, she seems more like she's kind of, we could take her to Comic-Con. We could have some fun. She's wild. She likes technology. She doesn't mind watching videotape surveillance of one of the techs banging a robot. She kisses, other girls. It would be interesting, and I think we'd have a fun life together.
All right, so I'm going to go a little bit different from you guys. I'm going to kill Elsie, and here's why. She's a little bit like uppity, like she's constantly trying to like one up everyone. I don't know, like listen, I like her. I think she's sassy, but I feel like over time that'd probably grow a little, it'd be grating on me, and so I'm just going to kill Elsie and get it out of the way. As much as I love Shannon Woodward, I'm just going to kill her right away. I'm going to bang Armistice. Because she's hot, and any girl with that damage, with that big of a tattoo, she's a freak in bed. And then Teresa, I'm going to marry. Why? Because she's high up in a corporation. She's probably loaded with money. She's got a huge pension or 401k, and I just want to live off of her, guys. I want to be her. She's going to be my sugar mama. Even though she's an older woman, she seems to like. That you want an older woman. You want someone who knows her way around and is going to treat you well. So that's who I'm going to F, Marry, Kill out of the women.
If our audience, if you're a fan of The Walking Dead, which I am, reluctantly lately, give these guys a chance. It's our buddies RJ and Rooster, and it's Critically Dead is their podcast. I'll put a link in the show notes. So if you're a fan of the show, give them a chance. They're good guys, and they'll give you a good couple laughs.
Thanks, RJ, for writing in. Next one comes from Imogen from the Philippines. She writes, "Hi, Big D, Gene, and Raj. Do the tricks that Man in Black knows, like that cigar request for explosives we saw in episode 4, include how to command the host to go away, like Dr. Ford does? We've seen Dr. Ford say these commands. It's like there's a syntax he uses. One key element seems to be like they end in a tag question. A couple of examples. You'll put yourself away again, won't you, Bill? To Bill in cold storage. And you're not going to come back here again, are you? To the boy when he sent him away in episode 2. In episode 5, the Man in Black tells the boy, fetch us some water, would you? When he sent him away. Is this proof that the Man in Black knows how to command the host to go away? Note also that at the end of Dr. Ford, Man in Black, and Teddy's drink, Dr. Ford says to Teddy, Mr. Flood, we must go back in time and smile at perils past, mustn't we? What did he mean? Is he commanding Teddy to do something in the event of some peril as Teddy accompanies the Man in Black finding the center of the maze? Want to get your thoughts. That's all I have for now. Thanks for reading, Imogen.
I'll work these points backwards. Starting off with the we must look back and smile at perils past, mustn't we? That's a recharge. He's he's taking Teddy out of a dire position where he thinks he's dying because of blood loss and all that. And, Teddy springs right back up. The first thing he does is he pulls out his revolver, gives the chamber a good spin, puts it up, and he's ready to go. So I think that's all that was. It was a trigger. As far as the Man in Black knowing these cues, possible. I think that he was actually just asking the boy to get him some water. One theory that I've read out there, though, is that basically that these verbal cues are something that were enabled by Arnold, and so that Dr. Ford hasn't even invented them. That's why he needs them. Actually, is that it's actually he's unlocking that code that Arnold put in there, and if he were to the reason why he doesn't remove that code, the reason why he doesn't undo what Arnold did, is that if so, he would lose his ability to do what he does. So basically, like, Arnold's code in everything in Westworld is the reason why he can control them, why Ford can control them. And if he were to remove it, that's why he doesn't remove it or wipe it, because then he would lose the ability to control everything.
Man, that's a fantastic answer. I didn't even think about that. Good job, Gene. Thanks for writing in, Imogen. Next one comes from Carrie. Again, resident tinfoil hat Carrie. She wrote us multiple times this week, but I really like this one because there's something she puts at the end. She says, these special narratives are ongoing Arnold versus Ford war games. Ford created AI Arnold, who would gain sentience more quickly than anyone could have imagined. Now, Ford's challenge is twofold: keeping the AI robots inside the park and away from the real world outside. And number two, prevent Arnold from destroying the very tech that comprises him. It's been going on since the start. Now that Ford faces an attack from Arnold Dolores inside the park, trying to destroy this world, and that the Man in Black from outside the park trying to get the tech out, he has created Maeve as a weapon. But is she really a weapon, or has he foreseen the tech finally breaking his controlling grip and breaching the real world? And the bicameral lunatics would be a disaster. Maeve has a better shot at behaving enlightened. Ford knows what's coming. He defrosted his equivalent of an undead army in advance. And then she put the screenshot of cold storage. Guys, are we going to see zombie hosts appearing, a la Red Dead Redemption?
I don't know about zombie hosts, but there is definitely a reason why they showed us cold storage, and there's definitely a reason why things are thawing out down there. It can't be, with all the technology they have available to them, other than budget constraints or whatever. There can't be a legit reason why they can't keep a room frozen. I mean, fuck, Arby's can keep things frozen. These guys should be able to keep things frozen. So in that sense, I think that there is you're going to see that come into play later on. I hate calling them zombies, though. You know how much I hate zombies.
White Walkers? Should we call them White
Walkers?
Walkers?
Much better.
Got it. All right.
No, I think it's a last ditch, mechanism that he has. It's his nuclear option. If it all goes down bad, and that would make sense why he'd pull out so many hosts from narratives. He's building up his last defense. I could see his power in the park being threatened if there is a revolution coming. And to have an army standing by, I just hope they put some clothes on them before the veiny, greasy, pale hosts start running amok in the park.
All right, next one comes from Candace. She writes, just wanted to point out that the Man in Black is left-handed and William is right-handed, so I don't think the show creators would overlook a detail like that. So William is Man in Black theory is crap, and that's why.
I don't know how you're defining handed, but the Man in Black shoots right. So I'm not sure where. I mean, maybe he does other stuff with his left hand, but he shoots distinctly right. He's got a cross draw. The gun is holstered at left, and he cross draws with his right. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think I've only seen William shoot with his right hand, so I'm not sure where she.
I'm also left-handed, but I shoot a rifle right-handed. Because I can't close the opposite eye.
Interesting. Oh, maybe that's why. All right. Thanks, Candace, for writing in. Next one comes from Carver. He says, hello, my name is Carver. I'm from the UK. I'm loving your podcast. I've listened to quite a few other Westworld podcasts, but you guys are my favorite. And I like how he wrote the favorite with a U. It's nice. My crackpot theory is that Logan is the Man in Black. The show is trying to deceive us by giving us white hats and black hats. Normally, I think we are used to seeing how someone can become evil, and that William is the origin story, and that something bad must have happened to him that turned him into the Man in Black. I think it makes more sense for it to be Logan. These are my reasons. We are watching potentially 3 timelines: Logan William in the past, Maeve in the present, and Bernard. And when Bernard is wearing black and talking to Dolores, that's maybe 6 months into the future. Logan states how his company is looking to buy Westworld, and then we see Man in Black with his conversation with Ford, how he mentions how he saved the park from Arnold. This may be, though, providing the park money, and therefore he becomes a VIP with full access. However, he may have also meant physically as well. He stopped Arnold and Dolores' plan, and I think William died after discovering the maze. I think Logan is after the truth. He suspects Ford is hiding something, and that when he finds the center of the maze, he will truly find out the real meaning of the park. I believe Arnold wanted to create the host with freedom, but Ford killed him so that he could sell out and keep the hosts as prisoners. Ford wants control. Thanks for the podcast. Keep it up. And that, again, comes from Carver. Guys, what do you think about this? Another Logan is Man in Black theory.
Well, my take is this. Anytime a business is going to be acquired, and we hear that the lawyers couldn't find anything, but if the Man in Black's company, or whether it's Logan or William, or they come in and save the park financially, there would be some form of due diligence done. And in that due diligence, you would uncover a more detailed history. So I would expect the older Man in Black, if he was involved in this, to have a detailed version of what happened. And we hear he knows a lot of details. He seems to be one of the only ones who knows about Arnold. So that could make logical sense.
Thanks so much for writing in. Next one comes from Greg. He writes, in episode 5 with the fortune teller, there are no cards on the red felt when Dolores reaches for a card, but there are 2 cards on the felt when she places the maze card down. The one next to the maze card is marked XXV, which 25. Is 25, which actually doesn't exist. There's only 22 major arcana cards, ending with 21. Additionally, the image on the card to the left is 2 people on horseback, one dun and one bay-colored, like Dolores' horse and William's horse. And the rider on the dun is wearing a blue dress. Coincidence? I think not. Again, this comes from Greg. What do we think about that? I don't know much about tarot cards or arcana cards.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think Big D has pointed out that nothing in this show is, coincidence. That everything is done intentionally, and it's that sort of attention to detail that's really sets it apart. It is important, though. I think one of the mistakes that I encourage everyone to watch out for is to make sure that we don't get too wrapped up in every little detail to the point where we're not actually watching the performances and letting the story unravel. I'm just as guilty of it. I pause frequently and am trying to note everything. What does the bottle say? Who's in the background? Where are they standing? What does this building look like? What is that statue? And everything else. But if something is as distinct as tarot cards, there's definitely symbolism there. And I think it's part of it might be indicative that this is a hallucination or some sort of a part of Dolores' head. But earlier when someone had mentioned that why didn't the Man in Black just go grab the tarot card? I don't think the tarot card would be there for the Man in Black. I think this is in Dolores' head. Whether it's a narrative being uploaded or some sort of a glitch or just her interfacing with the park. I think that, again, that's her knowledge of tarot. So the significance there is essentially that she's seeing things that she wants to see or is accessing through her own mind.
All right, next telegraph comes from Rick B. He points out through screenshots that Minnie Ford is a mechanical host. And this is, I think this is in an upcoming spoiler or not. I think this is an upcoming episode trailer. Is that?
No, I think this was out in the beginning. This was one of the first, I think it was alongside one of the trailers. So it was, I think it was Nolan and a couple of producers talking about the show and a few of the actors. I think it was released prior because I remembered seeing it. And the specific scene that he sends in where the young boy is shown with his face physically opening up. You get the appearance that he's a porcelain doll, and it's an early version of the hosts. I remember seeing it, and somehow it was wiped from my memory. I completely forgot it. But going back and looking at these screenshots, which we'll post, I think, open up a whole host of possibilities.
I like how you said it will open up a new hosts of possibilities. So are we seeing a flashback here, or is the young kid just kind of he's a leftover artifact?
It looks like in the scene that he's in a family setting where there's a woman in the back. It looks like she's setting the table and there's another child. I get the vibe that he was possibly a child replacing a lost member of a family. And again, I'm just going off of a few stills. I will post them up there and we'll see what people think, but there's so many tasty possibilities. Great.
Next one comes from Nate. He posted a link to the Nerdist News with Jessica Chobot. I wanted to get our opinion of this. Essentially, the summary is Timeline 1 is Bernard is Arnold, Arnold is Bernard, and we're seeing them interact during the early days of the park. Timeline 2 is the adventures of William and Logan. And then Timeline 3, William returns as Man in Black. Now, guys, we've talked about there being separate timelines, and I know it's not technically a timeline, but it's all different stories are happening at different parts of the history of the park, but we've usually stuck to 2. This is introducing 3 different timelines. What do you guys think of that? That when we're seeing Bernard give Dolores the books about for her to read about being aware, that's early, and then the adventures of William and Logan somewhere in the middle, and then William returning as Man in Black 30 years later. What do you guys think of this?
All of them are possible and very likely. It'll probably be a combination of everything. We keep hearing tons of, the Man in Black is this, the Man in Black is that, this is that. I wouldn't be surprised if we were watching 3, 4, 5 different timelines. And that's the beauty of it. They're weaving it together pretty well.
And again, we'll post a link to Nerdist. Thanks for writing in, Nate. The final one comes from Vic. He writes, this show isn't even really a TV show anymore. He says, no new theories this week. Too many out in the general geekverse to come up with any new ones. Most of them are pretty good. But I still have to say some stuff. In general, this show isn't really a TV show anymore. At least I don't watch it for its TV-ness. It's a puzzle show. I watch it to see how the new bits of evidence we're given each week confirm or debunk any previous theory. Is this a good TV show? Is it good pure storytelling? Good filmmaking? I don't know. I kind of think it's a bit more clunky and narratively weak than my perception is because I'm more invested in the puzzle. Now, I don't go into the show or episode for the puzzle aspect, but 5 minutes in, my brain is whirring and lining images and dialogue up with all of these theories. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is how the vast majority of viewers seem to be ingesting the show. While we may have, definitely have, gone light years beyond what the Nolans likely intended or expected us to discover, the fact remains that they intended the show to be a big old mystery box. As has been the think piece numerous times in this day and age, there is no way for a TV show to get ahead of audience crowdsourcing, especially when that crowd is all in on solving the show before we get to the end. In all honesty, I really don't care what happens to Dolores or the Man in Black, at least from a character standpoint. I'm not living and dying with Dolores' fate or her slow emergence into selfdom. Oh, selfdom. Okay. All right, cool. It's neat and interesting, but she doesn't achieve independence. I won't feel bad for her or any of the characters like I do for a Game of Thrones character or a Fargo character. Puzzle is far more compelling than the narrative of the show itself. And while everyone has a theory, including me, that they happily spout out into the world, I think you do, many of them, myself included, by lumping everyone into the same what's wrong with everyone in their crazy theories bucket. While my theories were crazy to be sure, I was in no way invested in them or relying on them to provide my enjoyment in the show. I'm sure that's the case for some people and their crazy theories, but for many of us, maybe even most of us, it's all just part of the fun for this show and shows like this. Finding a wrinkle that maybe no one has touched on, and upon throwing it out there for the world to evaluate, it's more like the crackpot theory lottery. You pick your theories, and then each time they play an episode, you check your ticket to see if anyone you guessed had any merit. If you're lucky, you got one number right out of 6. Keep up the good work and fighting the good fight. Vic.
I remember when we first started this podcast and first started watching the show, and if you go back and listen to that first episode, what we're talking about, it has hardly anything to do with secrets and conspiracies and all that. We were actually just talking about how cool the opening sequence was, and how cool, the music was, and how great performances were, and how we were blown away by how well they established the storyline. And then a couple things started sneaking in, like the player piano in the opening series, And then I remember I got a message about the multiple timelines. And it was about when William and Logan arrive, and how the logo is different and it looks a lot like Cold Storage. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm hot for this. And I thought this was like going to be an isolated thing. Even then, very naive about it. Had no idea it was going to explode into what it exploded to now. But here's the thing. It could be appreciated in so many ways. And again, we talked about the scene with Ed Harris and Anthony Hopkins doing incredible acting. Louis Hertham doing Peter Abernathy, and that entire breakdown of that host, phenomenal work. And the cinematography, beautiful. The action sequences, at times they have their moments. The sheer creepiness and revulsion that you feel, with Rebus and Walter. I mean, all that stuff is so well done. And it reminds me of reading a book. And when you read a book, I like to use examples, The Great Gatsby or Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. You look at those books, and yeah, you can say, hey, there's some great action here. There's some great imagery. These characters are likable or interesting or whatever. But then you also go back and you look at what's the symbolism in Gatsby. What's the symbolism of the bone cufflinks? What's the symbolism of the green light across the water? What's the symbolism of the billboard looking down on everybody, right? And if you were to look at the book in that sense, you could see there's a lot of foreshadowing there. So I think that the greatest payoff of this show is going to be at the end of the episode. At the end of the season, right? When we get there, and then you have the joy of watching it all over again and seeing how everything ties together. And I think then we're going to see the full tapestry. It's like an impressionist painting. You got to take 3 steps back to really see the beauty of it, right? So again, I think everyone appreciate it and enjoy it the way you want to enjoy it. If you're a puzzle guy, watch it for the puzzles. I'm with Big D, where I think from now on I'll have to watch it once full through without trying to pick it apart, and then watch it again for the clues to fully enjoy it.
Yeah, and to put a bow on this, I think they're in a tough spot. You have to do world building, plus establish all the characters. You're developing kind of the mythology of the show. So I'm hoping that this lost mystery hunt, crazy theory is only through the first season. I think it's a plot device used to not waste the storyline of the actual first incident, that happens. And I'm hoping that season 2 on, because, I'm thinking most likely it's going to be renewed, will be a more straightforward story with sprinkling of mythology. But I don't want every season to be this crazy screen grab theory where, I'm focused more on trying to find a clue than sitting back and enjoying the performances.
There was an article that was written, and I posted it on Twitter today, about how the guy took the angle that the fact that there's so many theories presented and so many podcasts dedicated to the show, and people trying to outwit the writers and be the first to say, I told you so, is actually detracting from the enjoyment of the series. Is there any truth to that, or is this part of the fun? Is this why it's so popular?
I would be furious if I were an actor on this show doing my best to deliver a performance that made you sympathize with the character or detest the character or be invested in that character's future. And there was just a bunch of people taking screenshots and looking at everything around except for what's actually going on. And what I find very interesting is that how little focus has been put on dialogue and how much focus has been put on setting and props. People are looking at a bunch of stuff, but they miss things that are right in front of them that people are saying flat out, and what people are trying to convey, what characters are trying to convey. it's not a coincidence that it's built and structured the way it is. It's very, very smart marketing. It's a very smart way to tell you a lot about things. You know, I hate when a movie spoon feeds you facts or a show spoon feeds you facts. At the same time, there are different ways to do it, right? You could put labels on the screen. You could do, you know, backstories and vignettes and flashbacks and all that. Or in this case, you could just leave clues around that cause people to do their own digging. And in doing their own digging, such as the names of the characters, they learn so much more about the characters that you would never have the time to actually explain to them.
Yeah, and I believe part of the fun and why Westworld is so popular is because it's engaging an audience. It's striking when you know, the popularity of show recap podcasts like this one, and you know, theory solvers on Reddit are you know, in vogue right now. It's part of, you know, what we do right now. You know, Lost was kind of like that first one that did it, but now it's mainstream. So anyway, thanks for writing in, Vic. Again, this was a supersized Westworld Telegraph. We hope that you have enjoyed listening to it, probably over multiple days. We broke our cardinal rule. Guys, what do you think about this going forward? Do we want to do just like a top 20 emails, or what do you guys want to do?
You remember last week when I said we should do no more than 10?
If we do 10, it'll be like a 15-minute podcast.
That's bullshit.
Yeah, you see, this is what goes on. People think we always agree. We can't even agree on this. But we'll come up with a solution, because I don't think any of us want to have a 2.5-hour podcast. But at the same point, when we get so much quality feedback, you know, we're going to have to figure out a balance that people's voices are heard, because we know everyone loves it.
Yeah, and there were a couple emails that we skipped over because there were duplicate questions asked. But for the most part, I mean, these are all kind of separate, different theories. And I mean, it goes to the credit of our audience. And I guess the one thing that we'll say, this will probably be the last almost 3-hour podcast you'll have us upload and distribute.
Hey, but I enjoyed it. It's not a bad thing.
So it's time to put away the Westworld Telegraph, shut it down until next week. We hope you've enjoyed this supersized, packed audience recap episode. This will probably be the last time you'll ever hear us do almost 3-hour podcast. But we do it for you, the fans. You can find all these theories and much, much more on our website. Go to shatontv.com, click on Westworld Telegraph. Like we said earlier, it's an easier version of Reddit that you can comment and join the conversation. You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, wherever fine podcasts are found. Please subscribe. Leave a 5-star review on iTunes. We'd absolutely love that. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We're at ShatOnTV. And you can find us on Facebook just by searching for Shat on TV Westworld. On behalf of my very upset that we went 3-hour host, Gene Lyons, and my very tired but still awake co-host, Big D Dick Ebert, this is the Raj saying we'll see you next time here at Westworld.